across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 3 minutes past 10. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, are you as D-mob happy for the bank holiday Easter weekend as I am? Yeah, let's face it, a lot of people are. Although I realise a lot of you are already on the Easter holidays. I say holidays. You're only on Easter holidays because you've got your kids and basically you're just escaping from them. So if you are if you're at work or if you're at home, just managed to sneak into the kitchen or, I don't know, pretend you had to go and get something urgently in the car so you could actually have a listen. Welcome to the show. Always great to have you join us. So much to talk about. If you miss anything on the show, don't forget you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, yes, we are going to talk about those NASA astronauts aboard the Artemis 2 spacecraft. They blasted off successfully late last night UK time on the furthest human journey from Earth in over 50 years. I know JK doesn't think this matters. I know he doesn't care. I'd like to think that actually an awful lot of the other media have gone rather over the top on a lot of this and the technicalities. But we're going to be talking with our favourite space boffin. He's going to be here in the studio, Andy Lound, about why this really does matter and why you really should care about this and how this is actually a game changer for the human race. I am not overblowing this, people. I really am not. This is not about going back to this funny little moon thing and touching down. That is not what this is about. It's so much bigger than that. Also, we're going to be talking about the nothing burger that was Donald Trump's speech, his address to the American people last night, of course, effectively address to the world about what's going on with the Iran conflict. He didn't really say anything. And one thing he specifically didn't say was the mentioning about the US pulling out of NATO. He did, though, say he wanted to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age. Pretty sure that would be a war crime, President, but we'll also talk about why Keir Starmer thinks that the answer to everything wrong in the world is crawling back to the EU. All that coming up, plenty more besides. So much to talk about. Can't wait to get your calls on everything. You're welcome to call in on the Artemis 2 rocket. Welcome to call in about Keir Starmer crawling back to the EU. He's desperate to do that. Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, saying that London is a safe city. Has he got out of his armoured Range Rover and is without his police escort lately? Does he really feel that way? But crucially, I want to hear from you about Donald Trump. He did yesterday, before this speech, threaten to pull the US out of NATO. He did this in an interview with the British newspaper. Didn't mention that, as I say, didn't mention it in his overnight address. But what is your reaction to that? Does it matter? Is it just more words from Donald Trump? He says something different every 10 minutes. He says something different in one of his own social posts. Should we care about that? Should we be worried about that? And what can we do to stop it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us also on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. All together now. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Delighted to say, as always, on a Thursday, Philip Ingram joins us. He's a former senior military intelligence officer. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I'm so pleased that you're as excited about this Artemis 2 launch as I am. And I have to say, this is my thing. I'm not excited in a, oh, good, tell me about the thrust of the rocket boosters. Tell me a bit more technical stuff about this or that. And this, that stuff, I've got to be honest, leaves me cold. And I think there's been a lot of people on the telly boxes talking a lot of this game and just trying to impress us with just how much they know about the technicalities. I'm really, really fascinated, though, by the big picture of this, which is why I'm really excited we've got Andy Lound in, because this isn't about a 10-day mission to go round the moon and come back. That's not what this is about, Artemis 2. 4 astronauts. I couldn't care less as a woman. I couldn't care less what colour skin anyone's got. I couldn't care less if there's someone who is not an American. Notice all the people going up there, all former British colonies, just saying. I feel the need to, you're welcome, the world, you're welcome. But the key thing about this is the start. This is basically the start. Yesterday was day one of the 21st century, basically, space exploration. Wasn't it?
Oh, it's fascinating, and you've got me here. At the age of 8, I was the youngest ever member of the Irish Astronomical Association.
Yeah,
I watched all the Apollo...
Sorry, you just said he was a nerd. I could just translate that for you. He was a nerd.
Yes. Oh, a space nerd.
Proudly so.
Very proud of space nerd. I had pictures on my wall of the Apollo rockets going off.
Yeah.
I watched lots of them from a very, very early age. I am that old. And was fascinated and was so sad whenever the Apollo missions ceased, and then whenever the shuttle missions ceased. So,
basically, NASA lost its funding. The Congress, which funds it to the tunes of many, many billions of dollars, basically lost their nerve when they lost 7 astronauts. Basically, and people said it was too big a price to pay. And it's basically been on hold for decades.
The benefits to humanity from space research and space exploration is phenomenal. And people do not go around today without something that has been developed through space technology.
It's really that simple, and also it's about the future. Look, man is an exploratory creature. It's what we do. And yes, we'd have to say man.
Translate. We're nosy buggers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the urge to look around. Again, I mentioned on the show yesterday this absurd thing, Radio 4's Moral Maze, which I happened to catch a preview talking about, is it moral for us to be going to space? I mean, this is literally a programme on BBC that we have to pay for, pay the salaries of everyone involved, by the way. Is it moral when we have poverty, disease and climate crisis? We don't have climate crisis, and is it moral? But also, are we just repeating the failures of colonial expansion, the mistakes of colonial expansion in recent? Maybe
the Martians in a few millennia will sue us and force us
for
to
reparations.
Force us to take all the statues from the first city in Mars down of human beings that get there.
Bound to happen, and the racism against the newcomers
against the Martians it'll be terrible.
It's just mad.
Green is not the colour anymore.
But you mentioned Mars, and that's what it's actually all about. Because this isn't about going around the moon. In Artemis 4 and Artemis 3, Artemis 4 is going to be landing on the moon, and this is about setting up not just an ISIS space station orbiting Earth, but an actual space station on the moon with a view to, in decades to come, going to Mars. They're going to basically test everything out on the moon before going to Mars. And also the crucial thing, really, really crucial, is about actually from, I think it's Artemis 4 onwards, it's going to be built by Elon Musk's company.
Well, Elon Musk has already sent a car to Mars. They are heading out in the direction. So there's a nice convertible there, ready for the first astronaut.
But the key thing here is about right now, all the rockets that go up, the NASA sends up, basically they go up, and then everything is destroyed on the way back down. It's all gone. Yeah. The key thing about what Elon Musk is doing at Starship is actually, and Jeff Bezos as well, is about stuff that you can use and then use again and again and again. That means you take the cost down from $4 billion launch to way below that, and you learn the lessons. And this is about, it's an absolute game changer.
Elon Musk's latest booster has been used. This will be its 34th use when it launches later this month. Yeah,
it's going to be fascinating. We're going to talk more about this with Andy Lound. Hopefully we can persuade you why I think this is a good use of certainly the Americans' money. I think we've got input as well. Let's also talk about Donald Trump. It's interesting, actually, given all the focus there was on this, I'm quite surprised by him choosing last night for his address to the nation. But a 20-minute address, very short for him. He's gone a bit Kim Jong-un as well. A little bit lately, where he's been giving these very long addresses. State of the Union just went on for hours. But he was talking about Iran, and there was a lot of concern after he'd already done an interview yesterday talking about how he was threatening to pull the US out of NATO. But he did say, crucially, the Iran war, the Iran conflict, it was on track. He talked about 2 or 3 more weeks. Then he was talking about bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. But as always, all these no mention, interestingly, of the NATO withdrawal. But they're all talking about telling Europe that they should grab and cherish the Strait of Hormuz. He's not bothered. He doesn't get his oil out of there. He doesn't care, he says. But all this idea that Iran must come to the table. But if you've obliterated their nuclear capability, and apparently he did that a year ago anyway, he claimed, if you've done that, and you've bombed them, he claims, into the Stone Age, which, by the way, would be a war crime, why would you need them to come to the table and do a deal? It's all a bit confusing. Did he say anything that was worth listening to, other than the fact that whatever he said did put a barrel of oil up about 5%? No,
he said nothing. He didn't mention, as you say, pulling out of NATO. He didn't mention Ukraine. So it was unfocused, a bit like Keir Starmer's speech earlier yesterday, was it the day before, where he didn't say very much as well. And Donald Trump, I think his irk about NATO was stimulated by Keir Starmer's response, because he's personally attacked him a few times. Yeah. And his whole issue about NATO is purely down to what Keir Starmer's done. exacerbated.
Is it? What about the French and the Spanish?
Well, exacerbated by the Spanish and the Italians not allowing the Americans overflight of their airspace. But they don't need much overflight of their airspace. It's down to Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford, which were key to US planning for Iran.
But fundamentally, look, there's a difference, isn't there, between Russia saying, and I think quite wrongly, Ukraine's your problem. Although I do think the Europeans have been spending more on defence. You and I have agreed on that many a time on this show. But saying you can't fly over our airspace. Yeah. I mean, it's a bunch of governments who are basically trying to woo their lefty vote, their Muslim vote, and they're just playing games. I mean, I'm sorry. This isn't about international, global, strategic politics. This isn't about playing a long game. It's not about ethics, or it is simply about we're just going to appease a very loud vocal minority in our country.
Oh, 100%. And Keir Starmer's stance was just to appease his cabinet rebels and his backbenchers because of the upcoming local council vote. But you get countries be petting like that. We can't fly RAF aircraft over Spain if they're going into Gibraltar, because Spain has
do sod off.
Yeah, exactly. So they have to go around the outside and down through the Bay of Biscay.
That's a technical term.
Around the outside.
But I mean, when Donald Trump says, if you've got a problem with the Strait of Hormuz being closed, sort it out yourselves. Well, the thing is, but it's only closed because of you. But there is a global issue here, and an issue for the Middle East, and in particular the Arab allies of America, the Qatars, the UAEs and others, who Donald Trump is such big mates with and keeps claiming to be so concerned about, is that they rely on the Strait of Hormuz being open to get their oil out. And what he's established is Iran has they don't need nuclear weapons to have a stranglehold on a crucial shipping route, an energy route, and that they now hold an awful lot of cards.
There's another key player in this that hasn't come out and Donald Trump hasn't mentioned, and I don't think he's taken into consideration properly. China gets 40% of its oil output through the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore when Donald Trump is turning around and saying those of you who use it should go and seize it and keep it open, Xi Jinping might be sitting there going, okie dokes, I can do that, and I can then save the Middle East countries and bring them onto my side.
Which is what he's been, again, that Belt and Road based policy across Africa, South America and everywhere else. Basically, bit of investment, bit of help, and can you now do our bidding? And that's what's been going on. While everyone said, isn't it great to have America being isolationist? No, it's not, because China is taking over that role, and Russia to a certain extent. I can remember you and I discussing, what are we 4.5 weeks into this war? I can remember you and I discussing whether or not there was this issue of, this was a big game. This wasn't just about Iran. This wasn't just about what's going on in the Middle East. This was a big global political strategy about basically, cutting off that the axis of evil, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Iran, dealing with China and taking them on, and I think a lot of us, you probably were, but most of us, I think, weren't aware of, the oil going from Venezuela to Cuba and to Russia and Iranian oil going to China, and the way all these countries work together, supplying weaponry, information and energy. And this was supposed to be part of this whole sort of, global plan. The big worry for me is I'm not intrinsically opposed to the getting rid of the regime in Iran, all in favour of that, in fact. Absolutely feel strongly about Israel and other states, but certainly Israel as a democratic regime, but other, ordinary people living their lives in Arab states, don't care about any of the regimes in the Arab states, being concerned about the safety with the threat from Iran, that needed to be dealt with, and needed to be dealt with before they had a nuclear weapon. End of. Nothing to discuss. 100%. We learned that with North Korea. Nothing to discuss there. So I've got no problem with the war aims or anything, but it does seem to me the abject lack of planning and strategic thinking and preparation, for instance, seizing the Strait of Hormuz themselves first, is bewildering. Because, OK, Donald Trump doesn't do detail, but surely Marco Rubio does. Surely the Pentagon does.
Well, the Pentagon does. The Pentagon knew that the first thing that Iran would do would be to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you're going to sequence a series of operations from a military perspective, trying to capture and secure the Strait of Hormuz before you then destroy the IRGC and the Iranian government and all the rest of it is probably the wrong way round of doing it. So Donald Trump's next move might be to set the conditions to make it easier to control the Strait of Hormuz as a sequential operation. And that's what I'd be expecting to come next.
Right. Well, we shall see. I mean, what's fascinating about all of this, another nothing burger of a statement yesterday. We took it live on the show and we managed to stay awake vaguely. Keir Starmer speaking to the nation about what it's going to do about the cost of living. Basically nothing. as far as we can gather. But he did tell us about how he's shown clear and calm leadership. I mean, May's just turned up there and patted himself on the back. But he basically also said he's going to have a summit with EU leaders. I mean, if in doubt, have another meeting.
Summit.
He loves a meeting, doesn't he? He likes meetings like Donald Trump's like posting on social media. And both of them think that does something as opposed to actually just pointless words. But he's been accused of shamelessly crawling back to his EU friends. Basically, his plan to sort out the British economy is basically closer ties with Europe. He's forgotten all about Ukraine and the price hike there, forgotten all about the matter of lockdown. By the way, he supported the bailout on energy, wanted more back in 22. He wanted more lockdowns and for longer and sooner. So any money the Tories spent, Labour would have spent more, but by a order of magnitude. And apparently the only problems we've got actually entirely down to we haven't pushed net zero far enough soon enough, and we've left the European Union. If only we could rectify both of those things, but particularly going back into the EU, well, closer ties, which is code for we're going to try and basically go back in by hook or by crook.
Well, I remember you before the election turning around, on air here, sitting where you are today, saying that Keir Starmer, watch my space. You said Keir Starmer is going to try and take us back into the EU once he gets in. And
we know he's not a Democrat.
Yeah, we see him setting the conditions to do that. He's manoeuvring his way through.
It's the idea also, and we've got Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, who's been saying that, well, we wouldn't need to have if a party went in, and the Green Party said the same. If a party went into the next election saying they would return us to the EU, wouldn't need a referendum. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yes.
You absolutely would. And they know that because then they don't want another referendum, despite all the polls saying.
Because they know they'd lose it.
They 100% they'd lose it. I would love another referendum. Let's play. Never afraid of what the British people are going to think on that scenario. Mentioning Sadiq Khan, London is a safe city, he says. This after teenage mobs 2 nights in a row stormed high street stores in Clapham. I mean, you can see them sort of laughing and giggling, running away from the police. The police looking really quite inept. I think we've got, is it 5 teenage girls who've been arrested now? Again, Easter holidays from school, kids running amok. A lot of people, basically saying, this is where we are now in terms of children not having consequences. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, interestingly picking up on the fact that everyone's pointing out, you can't not see it on the video. Virtually all the faces of the kids are black. It happens to be an area there is a large black population. Now, I'd like to point, again, I'm not being PC, but in Southport, after the Southport riots, most of the people rioting on that were white. So I mean, are they this idea? She said, this is not because they're black. This doesn't happen in Lagos or whatever. I mean, actually, you see horrific scenes of mob violence in a lot of African countries, actually. But it's not down to colour. It's down to attitudes, culture. I would say, fatherlessness, but also abject failure by the state, failure by teachers to enforce discipline, parents, and the fact they are simply not afraid of the police. And why would they be?
Yeah, lack of discipline society at every level, from parental discipline through schools, through wider society. It's just it's shocking, and it's indicative of you class it as petty crime and disruption and civil disorder that there is across the country, not just in London. And we've seen the same in Birmingham and Manchester and elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we just talk very briefly, because we're going to go to a break. I want to get people's calls on air, but this is a really important story. Sod the rocket launch and Donald Trump and war and goodness knows what else. I've got my own dinosaur. I'm not joking. They've discovered a dinosaur, and they think it is a new species of dinosaur, and they have called it, I kid you not, I don't think it is named after me, I have here, the Juliasaurus. It's actually, have we got a picture of it we can put up for anyone watching on YouTube? Oh, we haven't got the picture yet. Oh no, the Juliasaurus.
Yes, well, Ted's going to owe me a £5 now, because it's clear that the dinosaurs are not extinct. There's one side the table from me. I'm outside swinging range, folks, and I'm closer to the door.
I can't reach him. We're going to get that picture up. 10:21 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Donald Trump has threatened to pull the US out of NATO. What's your reaction to that? Would you make a Keir Starmer basically trying to get us back into the EU by hook or by crook, by the back door? What do you make of the Artemis rocket launch? Do you think it's a waste of of money, or do you think actually this is an absolutely crucial step for mankind? Love to hear your thoughts on all of that and anything else besides. If you want to tell me how safe you think London is, love to hear from you as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Nine, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition and liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:25 is the time. Let's get to some of your messages about Donald Trump threatening to pull the US out of NATO. Your reaction. Lee says, don't blame him. NATO's not fit for purpose. That's a fair point. Katie says, NATO is another grifting organisation like the UN. Don't blame Trump, says Mark. American taxpayers have been paying for the security of Europe for decades. I couldn't agree with you more on that. And indeed, Donald Trump in his first term pointing that out. Luke says, I don't blame him. What's the point in paying to be part of an alliance that doesn't help you when you need it? I bet if it was a leftist country, Europe would hop straight to help it. There is no requirement under Article 5 of the NATO Treaty to help a country that has not been attacked itself. That would not be a requirement, and it's about protecting Europe and the mainland of the NATO countries. So Falklands wasn't covered, various other places aren't covered. It wouldn't actually be covered under the NATO Treaty. So there's no requirement for people to help on that front. Same with Iraq. It wasn't a requirement under NATO either. Let's face it, the US is NATO, says David. And good move, says Theo. NATO has passed its sell-by date. And Kay says the US can't even stop their military bases in the Middle East from being destroyed by little old Iran. Well, they've not been destroyed. What chance will they have against China or Russia? The US is a paper tiger. We need our own defences. I mean, I couldn't disagree with you more. I mean, we are the paper tiger. We've had the head of the Navy saying that we don't have the ability to defend ourselves in this country. I mean, literally, you've got one job, Navy. Let's go to the phone lines. Daniel wants to have his say. Daniel is in Epsom. Daniel, you want to talk about, as I just mentioned, those Clapham sort of nights of sort of, you know, basically mobs of young teenagers just rampaging through the streets and through shops. Only a handful of arrests and a big outcry, especially when Sadiq Khan says London is safe. It didn't feel very safe for people in Clapham the last few nights.
The point I'm trying to make, Julia, hi, by the way,
Hello.
is I think if you went back to, say, 1951, when my granddad was a young man, and you'd have pulled out a crystal ball to him and all of his friends, and you showed him the future, so London today, and you showed him that there were anti-British and anti-Jewish protests every weekend on our streets, that you've got black feral gangs basically rampaging through shops. And if you'd have showed him like the rape gang inquiry and mass Islamist prayer in Trafalgar Square, they wouldn't have believed you. They would have been shocked. And I think if they'd have seen that in 1951, if there was a way of viewing the future, I think we wouldn't have had hardly any immigration from the third world at all.
Oh, well, no, that's perfectly fair. I do get all the point of that. But again, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, picked up on the issue of people saying, oh, no, it's a bunch of black kids. Look, if anyone watching the video right now, it's almost entirely a bunch of kids who are black. The area, I used to live in Clapham, there's some very well-to-do bits of Clapham. There's also a lot of poverty, not rubbish, not poverty. A lot of people living rather less salubrious lives, and a lot of those will be black families. Kemi Badenoch made the point on social media last night. This isn't because these kids are black. This isn't happening, routinely in Nigeria or places like that where she originally came from. She says, that's not the case. It's about discipline, and it's about no fear of authority. It's about lack of consequences.
I'll tell you what it is. It's not really been covered by the mainstream media, and the reason it hasn't been covered by the mainstream media is because they were black.
No, you're right. If they've been white, you're right.
If this had been hordes of white young men doing the same thing, right? Number one, they would have been cracked down upon much harder by the police. Yep. There'd be more than 6 arrests. It would be in every newspaper. They'd be linking it to reform and the far right. Yeah. It's another two-tier justice we see before our eyes.
Yeah, very, very soft policing. You see these coppers going, OK, can you leave the store? Can you leave the store? Sod it. Throw them to the ground, handcuff them. But again, it's the resources. We know more police have been put on in that area. But where's it going to happen next? All very fair points, Daniel. Thank you for that. Pat is in London. Pat, you want to talk about the Artemis rocket launch, don't you?
Yeah, lovely launch, very reminiscent of the 1960s. But hey, they did that before the Apollo 11. Mm-hmm. And basically, we should never have give up the moon. In fact, at that time, we was wading knee deep in the ocean of space. After that, we started on the shore, so where the water just covered our ankles in the ocean of space. Yeah. And we stepped back.
I think again, everyone got cold feet. The people paying for it all, the Americans through Congress, and they got cold feet after they lost 7 astronauts, and people went, what are we spending all this money on?
No, but we lost more astronauts on the space shuttle. Them Apollo launches, and before them Gemini and before them Mercury launches, on traditional rockets, there was never an explosion or never a burn up on re-entry. The space shuttle was a failed design. Yeah, exactly. Because it lost its... And then we built a Meccano set in space called the International Space Station.
But you're in favour of this space exploration?
No, yes, I am.
OK, well, I'm sure Andy Lound will be pleased. We are space boffing coming in very soon. Pat, thank you very much indeed. 10:30 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about what did Trump say and what did he not say in his address to the American people last night, and how worried should we be about US withdrawing from NATO. And we'll be talking to our space expert, Andy Lound, live in the studio about the significance of that rocket launch. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Just approaching 10:33. Well, let's talk about what the President of the United States last night said in his address to the American people. 20-minute long address. Quite short for him. He didn't go full Kim Jong-il. But what he didn't say, perhaps, may be more significant. David Karakos is here. He's a special correspondent at the Daily Mail. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Well, you were watching. Sorry about that. Someone's got to. But he said before this announcement yesterday, before this speech to the nation, I'm strongly considering pulling out of NATO. But he didn't mention that in his actual speech, his address to the nation. So is that still on the cards, or was that a whim on the day?
Look, one never knows with Trump. I remember speaking to a very senior army officer who was told that there would be no military action at a certain point. And then, as he said, then Trump sat down, finished his cheeseburger and told everybody to go. Look, what this NATO thing does remind me of, though, Julia, actually is Greenland.
Yeah.
So Trump then spent several months going on telling everyone that he was going to invade Greenland. Everyone got terrified. And obviously he didn't do it. And speaking to people in DC again, I don't think he was ever going to do it. Yeah. Look, Trump is very, very angry with his allies for not supporting him in this war. Now, you can question the wisdom of that, but that is a fact. So I think what he's doing is the same thing. He's essentially threatening people, saying, step up, help us, or I'm going to withdraw from NATO. And what I suspect, he didn't mention it, maybe he forgot about it, but it'll probably come up again next week, then he won't mention it, then he'll row back on it. And the goal is the same and the effect is the same. Everyone is uncertain, everybody's worried, everybody tries to kowtow and appease him.
Yeah, and everyone's paying attention to him. That's the thing you also crucially like, so these non-stop interviews and Truth Social posts. I mean, what's interesting, though, you can understand if he was trying to sort of, play games of sleight of hand with the enemy, with Iran, with Russia, with China. He doesn't seem to think Russia is an enemy, and they weren't sure where he was. It's the fact that his own allies aren't sure what's going on most of the time that becomes part of the problem. But he's certainly had a point since, 2017, 2018, when he first said in his first term, 2016, first term of office, basically, look, people aren't paying their way in NATO. He's managed to force these countries most of them to make a pledge to upgrade how much they're spending in NATO defences. But let's be honest, most countries, including Britain, aren't anywhere close to where they need to be. And the American taxpayers are still funding us. And if America doesn't think NATO's good value for them, perfectly good reason to pull out.
Look, I mean, I don't think he will, but I think you're absolutely right. Look, Trump talks a lot of nonsense, but he is not wrong about the freeloading. And look, as I say, I don't think he'll do it. But you know what, Julia? Sometimes the best way to deal with a crack addict is withdraw the pipe. Let's say he actually did it. I mean, it might actually force people to get serious. Look, we have wonderful, magnificent armed forces in our country. I deal with them a lot. I've written books about military affairs. And, it is a scandal the way they are underfunded, especially given the waste we have in Britain, and also especially given the incredibly dangerous and becoming ever more dangerous international situation. Yeah. We do not have air defences anywhere close to the likes of Ukraine. We do not have, and I've covered Ukraine since the beginning, since 2014, we don't have drone capabilities anywhere close to Ukraine. And given, Ukraine's been fighting for a long time, but given our respective wealth, our respective history of military affairs, that is a scandal.
I would say genuinely the failure of numerous governments to actually build up our defences to a level where, we don't have naval chiefs saying, basically we can't actually fight a war when that's literally your entire job, to fight a war, to defend this country. I would say it's traitorous. I think it's an act of treason to have failed the British people in such a way that we can't be any use. I mean, again, Donald Trump, it's another thing he's been saying about, if you want, you want the Strait of Hormuz to be open, grab and cherish the Strait of Hormuz. Is there any capability, as someone who's knowledgeable about military affairs, any capability of the European partners to seize back the Strait of Hormuz?
I mean, I'd be very, very worried. Look,
I always love it when a sound effect answers the question.
You can tell it's really dodgy. Look, even for the Americans to do this, Julia, it's hard, let alone the Europeans. I mean, theoretically, yes, but we're talking about, it's not a straight military operation. The Iranians are going to fight asymmetrically. They've got even things as little suicide speedboats. They love a bit of suicide stuff, the Iranians. It's very hard to do this. Yeah. So in one sense, I can understand. Look, everything you've said about the traitorousness of doing doing this. But we did it because we thought the Americans would just come to save us.
Yes.
And maybe one day Daddy won't come to save us. Maybe one day the crack will end. And that's a good thing. And it's hard. But, detoxing is hard. Getting off the crack is hard.
But also understanding, and one of the reasons why I'd never wanted us to be part of like an EU defence force, and that was how we controlled our defences, is because our interests don't always align with other European countries' interests. Our interests don't always align with American interests. They're a global player in terms of dealing with the Pacific as well as the Atlantic side of things. We have our own Commonwealth interests. We've got different things in play, and it's very important to be aware of that. What did you make of his threat? Well, crucially, he was saying that they're going to hit Iran extremely hard. He talked about bombing Iran back to the Stone Age, but he also talked about how the war will end shortly, and they're basically on track. Now, we understand from sources in Washington, we're looking at a sort of 4 to 6 week long plan for the war originally, although he may have expected it would go Venezuela way and everything would change on day one. Rather unrealistic expectation, but he may have had that expectation. Is it realistic that US could pull out and the Strait of Hormuz is magnificent, miraculously reopened and everything goes back to where it was, but Iran is no longer a major threat to its Middle Eastern partners in particular, or neighbours in particular, Israel, and indeed the West? Or could this continue for much longer?
I mean, ultimately, I guess it will continue for as long as Donald Trump wants it to, because if he decides to walk away, I mean, he's one president that could do it. Now, there's a couple of points here. There's a very interesting question you posed. First of all, let's understand one thing. Let's say this war ended tomorrow. It won't, but let's say it ended tomorrow. The Straits aren't going to go back to normal immediately. It's going to take weeks for things to go back to normal. The tankers are backed up. The shipping lanes are confused. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if we really, and this is really important, Julia, amid the noise and the hysteria and everything else, the only way to assess the actual strength and success of this campaign is when the shooting stops. Look, what we have seen is an extremely, at the narrow tactical level, hugely impressive military operation that has decapitated Iranian leadership with the use of intelligence to a level that I can see no modern parallel for. But that has been accompanied by very confused messaging. Look, on the first day of the war, Trump gave the Iranians a gift. He said regime change. As soon as he said that, every single day the Iranians survived, they could say we're winning. Yeah. We're winning. And so the discourse moved towards them. People are saying, oh, the Iranians aren't rising up. Of course they're not rising up. It's being bombed constantly. Right now, all of the regime's apparatus is going to oppressing their people and to survive. Yeah. But you know that the Allies bombed the banks. They can't pay their people. Once this stops, let's see in the weeks and months that follow just how Iran's ability to oppress foreign and domestic still exists. That's when we can assess.
But you say, Donald Trump could just, end the war tomorrow on a technicality, but it takes two sides to end a war. I mean, well, three maybe. Israel have got, rather different war aims than Donald Trump and the US military have in terms of the existential threat that Iran poses them. They've got the war in Lebanon as well. Still, basically Hezbollah is still being funded by the Iranian regime. But what if Iran say, we're not stopping, we're going to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, we're going to control everything, or we charge, $2 million for every tanker that passes through. We basically highway robbery. What if they continue to bomb their neighbours in the Middle East, continue to bomb Israel? What happens then?
Look, I mean, that's a very good point. It's obviously not a unilateral exercise. My guess is that Iranians will want a respite. I mean, they are being hammered, right? And it's actually probably to a degree better for them that this continues at a low level. So maybe they're not as invested for it to end. But my guess is if the Americans stop, if they say, right, we're going, the Iranians will take the win. They'll say they've defeated the Americans, which is huge for them, especially after the loss of their credibility in the 12-day war.
Yeah, but that's the worry if America walks away having effectively lost that war, because that is very undermining and leaving Iran in control of a crucial energy route and trade route, which basically means they can, they don't even need nuclear weapons to have the power that they want.
Well, I mean, they were always in control of the Straits of Hormuz, don't forget. This is why they're able to blockade it. I mean, look, all of this stuff does hurt Iran. So I do see what you're saying, but yeah, it will be a loss of credibility. But here's the thing, and I keep returning to, let's just see then over the next few months how that they're able to govern, how they're able to function with the banks closed, with their leadership decapitated. Right now it's crisis, it's existential. I'm of the firm belief, and I'm not saying that this war is going to be a success, but you will only see the true effects on the Islamic Republic when it stops, and they have to just sit with everything that they've got degraded utterly.
Fantastic to talk to you. Hope you come back on the show. Special correspondent of the Daily Mail. That's David Patrick-Karakos, knows his defence. Certainly another man who knows his defence issues. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, still with me in the studio. Your response to what you had to say?
David's 100% right in everything he's saying, but the one thing I would add to it is Iran wants revenge. It's within their psyche. It's what they want to do, and if they come away thinking, or they can sell to the Iranian people that they got a victory, their revenge will come through asymmetric techniques, so primarily through terrorism across the region, and we will see a massive uptick of terrorism, not just across the region, but across the globe, as they seek to get revenge for
and
what
their
has
economic
happened.
warfare. I tell you, one of the things I find fascinating, though, is that Donald Trump's threat to withdraw the US from NATO, all very well, but that requires congressional approval.
Correct.
And that law was changed.
At two-thirds.
Two-thirds, yeah. I mean, and basically not even all the Republicans are going to want them, certainly not after the midterm elections, which are not looking good for Donald Trump, as they genuinely don't look good for any sitting president in what is effectively his second term. But what's fascinating is, guess who the man was who basically instigated the law to the change so it made there had to be a two-thirds vote in the Congress to approve any withdrawal from NATO.
One Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State under Donald Trump. It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? 10:43 is the time. Love to hear your reaction to all of that. Really interesting. Great guest, David Patrick-Karakos there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. And your thoughts on that Artemis space rocket launch last night. They are currently orbiting the Earth before heading off towards the moon. Is this a big waste of billions and billions of dollars? Should we be spending that money here on Earth? Or is this actually the start of the 21st century exploration of space and the furthering of humanity? One of the most significant events in the history of mankind? Well, we'll ask my next guest, space expert Andy Lown, live in the studio. If you want to stay tuned for that, this is Talk.
RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:46 is the time. Now, you might be a bit bleary-eyed today because you stayed up to watch not just the rocket launch of Artemis 2 last night, but perhaps watching it for rather longer than perhaps you planned to overnight. A lot of people here, I mean, not that bothered. A lot of people saying, oh, what do we care about a rocket launch? Oh, God, what's the point of going back to the moon? What a waste of billions and billions and billions of dollars and our time and energy. Why does the media spend so much time talking about it? Certainly JK this morning saying, no, really haven't got any interest at all. Well, I'm afraid I'm here to tell you why you should be interested and why you should care. And so is my next guest, a space expert, as I always say, my favourite space boffin. He doesn't mind me saying that to his face. Live in the studio, Andy Loud is here. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I was watching you last night. You were talking about this, and one of the things I love about you is you just love this stuff. You've got the experience, you've got the enthusiasm, but you've also got the knowledge and the ability to explain a lot of this stuff in layman's terms. A lot of the coverage has been very technical of this rocket list. I've got to be honest with you, I tune out at that point. But what I do care about is the big picture. So just tell us just briefly what happened last night and what this rocket is going to do, and then we'll go on to why this really does matter.
Yeah, this is Artemis 2. This is the crewed version of the Artemis project. The first one was launched a couple of years ago, uncrewed, to test the vehicle out. It needed some modifications. This is to, if you like, to rate it for human operations, and it will go on.
Is it safe?
To make sure it's safe, yes. And they'll do all the human activity on board to make sure it is, because things change when you put humans on board. Newton's laws of planetary motion still apply. So if a human is moving around in the spacecraft has to adjust itself to cope with that movement.
Good point, yeah.
So
and all you need the life, the life-giving oxygen and things like
everything
that.
Has to be tested out. They also tested manoeuvring the spacecraft manually to the booster stage to see if they can actually control it themselves. That worked very well, apparently, extremely well. And then they're going to do what's called a free return around the moon. The engine will fire later tonight to make...
They're currently just going around Earth, aren't they?
Orbiting the Earth at a very long ellipse. It's big, so they're very high, very
They're beyond
low.
the space station.
Well beyond that. They go below it and beyond it with its orbit at the moment. They'll fire the engine, they'll go at 24,500 miles per hour. And once you've reached that speed, that's it. The engine cuts off and you just cruise, and the Earth's gravity tries to pull you back. So you're slowing down until on day 5 the moon's gravity is stronger and you start to speed up again, and that will actually swing you around the moon and bring you what's called the figure of 8 straight back to the Earth. It's called a free return, so you don't need any more engine power to actually do it.
It just flings you back. But crucially, they're going to go around the outside of the moon. They're going to be going, was it 4,500 miles beyond the moon to the atmosphere?
Beyond
so they're going to go further than any human being has ever flown before.
Yeah, and the thing which is very important, I don't think many people are picking up on it, it's a really important element. These astronauts will be the first humans to see the far side of the moon in daylight. Because
the Earth is because the moon is going to be facing the sun. The dark side of the moon is facing the sun, not facing Earth. Well, this is the thing.
Far side.
Trying to get my head around this. Because of the way the moon spins and the Earth spins, we literally never see one side of the moon.
Due to tidal forces, the Earth is it rotates on the moon rotates on its axis. So they're going at the same time it takes to go around the Earth.
And they're going to get to see it, and obviously there'll be huge amounts of photography and measurements and things going on. And then they're going to come back. So it's they're going to have a day going around the Earth, 4 days there, spinning round, and then they're going to come back again. 10 days in total if it all goes well.
That's right, yes. Hopefully a re-entry, which is another test that you have to do.
Well, obviously, these are the dangerous times. It's like taking off and landing a plane. Now, a lot of people will go, you're not even landing on the moon. What's the point now? Artemis 3 isn't going to land on the moon either, but Artemis 4 is going to land on the moon. That is the plan, and that's going to be 2028.
Yes, that's the plan at the moment.
And again, people will say, well, what's the point of landing on the moon? We've been to the moon, Andy. We've done that. We did that back in 1969. What's the point of just another bit of pictures? I mean, there are lunatics who think we didn't actually land on the moon in the first place. So why does this matter, and why is this worth spending all this money, time and effort on?
Well, it's a little bit like visiting the Earth and landing in the Gobi Desert, taking a bit of sand, going back and saying, that's it, I know all about the Earth now. That's not the way it works. We have to go back. The thing with Apollo is they were sort of going down onto the ground, spending a couple of days, then coming home. What we need to do, and scientists need to do this, is to stay on the moon. To stay on the moon to do the research they really need to do. Like we've done in Antarctica, we've got a base there. And the thing is, if we start studying the moon in that level of detail, we'll learn a great deal about the evolution of the Earth as well. There's a couple of benefits from this as well. The technology that's developed is very vital to this planet. There's also raw materials on the moon, rare earth metals, materials like that. The green people are always kicking up about digging up the Earth and ruining it. Yeah, well, I'm afraid these raw materials are more easily available now because it's got to be cost effective from places like the moon. And the moon will be then a stepping stone to go on beyond into the solar system to Mars as well.
That's the crucial thing, isn't it? Because eventually we are looking at going to Mars. And it's fascinating because I've seen so many interviews with astronauts and people who are very excited about it, who say, I remember watching, the moon landing in 69. I think I was 1 year old in 69. So I certainly remember my parents talking about how exciting it was. But, obviously wasn't aware of it. But young people being inspired by that.
Yes.
The kids at primary school right now are likely the age of the people who will go on the first manned mission to Mars. Okay. Now, crucially, this is the thing: is they're testing out how you could, travel and live on another planet without, or the moon, without having an atmosphere, without having the same level of gravity, and basically learning to function without having, help just a few minutes away or even a few days away. You were talking on the show yesterday in advance of this about how much harder it is to do a mission to Mars, about the timing to get there and get back. Explain that again.
Yes, because going to the moon, we've got a window every 28 days because that's the orbit of the moon over the Earth. Mars is further away. It's twice the distance from the Sun.
Well, why can't you go to the moon? I mean, it's around the Earth all the time.
No, because the position would be wrong for launching, and it would take too much energy and too much fuel. So you've got to do it for the most efficient way.
Okay, right.
And this is why you got these very specific times. For Mars to be an ideal position for us to get to in a reasonable way, it's only in position every 2 years.
Right.
So that means we've only got 2 year windows.
Otherwise, it's a heck of a lot
It's much more difficult to. You always, because you don't shoot straight at the planet, you shoot at an angle, and as that planet moves in orbit, you rendezvous with it. And Mars is every 2 years is where you need to do it. Otherwise, you'd be spending too much fuel and time to do it. So that's why that one is more difficult to do. So it's a big, longer trip.
And crucially, when you're there, getting if something goes wrong.
Yes. What do you do?
We've all seen the film The Martian.
Yeah.
What do you do?
That's right. So we've got to learn that. One of the big benefits of this, and I don't think this is again coming over very well. One of the missions that they're doing is trying to understand medical conditions in space, radiation protection. What happens to the body in space? The beautiful thing of this is they'll develop drugs or techniques to help you. That actually feeds back down onto the ground on Earth, and can do treatments for cancers, treatments for breathing, and it's very important.
And it is really interesting in terms of the astronauts who've gone into space and those who've left Earth's atmosphere properly for lengths of time, and the difference in terms of their likelihood of getting cancer.
That's
it's
correct.
Very clear, the radiation issue, and they're going to be testing that out. But also, crucially, the idea is for future, not just that we can go to Mars, but not for the sake of it, but there is the biggest single threat to mankind isn't all the claims of what things can happen on this planet. It's something from outer space.
That's correct.
Hitting us. There've been major extinct events many times, not just the dinosaurs. Extinction events, but 95% plus of living creatures have been destroyed. The idea is having a plan B, having an alternative. We've watched this in sci-fi movies, whether it's Interstellar or anything, again and again and again. Is that a realistic prospect? And is the idea that sending a rocket through our gravity and the gravitational pull in our atmosphere involves a huge amount of energy, doing it from the moon would be much easier.
Much better. The moon's only 1/6 of the Earth's gravity, so therefore you're less energy to leave the moon and head off into space. So therefore a base on the moon opens up the whole solar system to you, in effect, for more exploration, for mining operations, and of course for protecting the Earth if necessary from asteroids coming in. You could actually have a defence system perhaps put onto the moon in preparation.
This is the plot of Armageddon. Well, basically we have to find people who can drill and get into.
Yeah, that was a bit extreme. But
we know that this is what this is being worked on by
it
NASA.
Is, but the idea is to actually we've already done it already with the DART mission, where you could actually hit an asteroid
and send it to different
deflect it slightly.
But this thing, when people say we should be concentrating on what's going on Earth, well, this is about.
Yes, it is all about space exploration. Is all about Earth. It's all about humanity. It's all about that. It always filters back down here. We have people banging on about green technologies. Space science needs green technologies to survive because you can't have waste products flying around the spacecraft. Yeah. So that technology can feed again back down here to Earth. Yeah.
And crucially, one of the really interesting things, although Artemis 1, 2 and 3, and 2 is the one that's in orbit right now, they're rockets who, basically everything involved in that rocket will be destroyed. Yeah. However, from 4 onwards, it's going to be Elon Musk's rockets which are going to be being used. And that's a very, very different matter indeed, isn't it? Those are rockets which basically are going to cost a heck of a lot less because you can use them again and again.
This is the thing that's happened. The NASA program, which was originally the Constellation program, had to use surplus equipment from the shuttle or derivative material of the shuttle, which was throw away a great deal of material. They were overtaken by the private sector. Elon Musk said, no, that's not cost effective. To get the cost down, we have reusable vehicles. And of course, Bezos has done exactly the same with Blue Origin. So the future is reusable vehicles. SLS is fantastic. It was wonderful. It was exciting. But to be honest, it's the last hurrah of the old tech.
So this is a complete change around, isn't it? Now, I know Philip Ingram, he's just sitting here grinning away. You're also fascinated by this thing as well. And you and I were discussing this a little bit earlier, that this is a really crucial factor about making it affordable and something that just becomes the norm.
Well, it is. And it's that affordability of the tech and the development that goes into it. And you talked about green technologies. Solar panels were developed to be used in space many years before they were used on Earth. And it's
You're not selling it to me on the solar panels.
But it's the development of all of these sorts of technologies, small nuclear reactors that are going to be needed on the moon to power everything else, the development of new methods of thrust through space with ion drives and all the rest of that comes from science fiction, but actually is going to be science reality in the future.
And
it's amazing.
Yeah, and this is the extraordinary thing, is that we're going to be seeing playing out in our lifetimes, hopefully, if we're lucky, the stuff that we've seen on Hollywood films.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is the beauty. We also have to mention hydrogen fuel cells here, because they were developed in Britain, and if we'd have kept that development going in the 60s, we wouldn't have a problem now with tech, because we'd have had our own hydrogen cell system.
So people listening are going, who cares? It's a rocket to the moon.
Well, everyone's listening to your programme. Everybody listens to the media. Well, if it wasn't for space science, you wouldn't have all these communication systems. You wouldn't have the computers that you've got now. You wouldn't have your smartphones. You
wouldn't have the satellites.
You wouldn't have the
GPS. Whenever you go, oh, where is that? Let me look up on Waze or Google Maps. That's from space.
Everybody's using space science, and they don't really realise it.
Oh, that's such a good point. No, but that's the thing. It's such a good point. It's well worth the money.
Absolutely, yes. And I mean, people say, oh, well, you spent all these billions in doing that. Yes, how much is HS2 costing? How long is that going to take to get into place?
Haven't even got any trains. At least we've got a rocket.
How much money has been spent by the American military bombing people? If you just took a fraction of that funding out, you could fund all your space programmes for the next 100 years.
Absolutely love it. And again, I think we all agree, if we had the option, I don't think I want to do Mars. We'd go into space, wouldn't we?
Oh, 100%.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I'd go to Mars, yeah.
You would
I want to go out there.
Yeah. And even though you'd never come back, realistically.
The trouble is, it's calling. It's been calling me since I was 5.
I mean, him and Elon, they'll be out there. You can lend him one of your wonderful space jackets. Oh, it's so good having you in the studio. My favourite space boffin, and yours, Andy Loud. He knows his stuff. I love how much you love it. Thank you so much for explaining it. JK, I hope you were listening to understand why this really does matter. So much more to come. More from Philip Ingram, more from you. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. We're fast approaching 3 minutes past 11. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So much more to talk about. If you do miss anything from the show, frankly, if you've just missed our fantastic chat with our space expert, Andy Lamb, promise you it's worth going back. Go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're also going to be talking more about Donald Trump's threat to pull the US out of NATO. Will he actually do it? Can he actually do it? And how worried should we be about it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. He's also last night urging Europe to grab and cherish the Strait of Hormuz, announcing the US is very close to ending the war with Iran. But is he? And here's the thing. Does he get to decide when the war ends, or does Iran get to decide? He's also, by the way, said that the king, who's due to visit, the state visit in the next few weeks, would have stood by him over the war in Iran, unlike Keir Starmer when it came to using that base at Diego Garcia. Plus, the BBC was aware of a police probe into Scott Mills, the Radio 2 DJ, who was sacked earlier this week, 9 years ago, but did not know that the boy who accused the star of sexual offences was under 16. Yet again, information has been to be dragged, kicking and screaming out of the BBC without them giving full information, and always makes them look worse. We've also had a statement from Scott Mills, finally having kept stum since he was taken off air, actually last week. But we'll bring you all of that a little bit later on in the show. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any and all the things we are talking about, whether it's not it's Donald Trump and what he's had to say, whether it's the Artemis 2 rocket launch and that success last night. We've got the plan to head off to the moon later today after orbiting Earth and doing some tests. I'd love to hear particularly what you think about that threat to pull the US out of NATO by Donald Trump. How worried are you? Give us a call. 0344 0444 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Do you think I've said that number enough? I'd say it off the top of my head, wouldn't you? Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1 standard network rate message. Philip Ingram, delighted to say, is still with us. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. You and I still beaming after our chat with Andy Lamb. I've been having a go at Jeremy Carl. JK doesn't think this is an interesting story. I think a lot of the media has gone a little bit overboard, hours and hours and hours. But I think that space launch last night, I went to bed rather too late watching that. Yeah. A lot of people go, they're still watching the feed. I mean, it's literally just a dot and some numbers on the screen. No, not for me, thank you. I just want to know they're going to get off safely. But it was fascinating listening to Andy Lamb explain just how significant this space mission is in terms of going to Mars, but also future humanity, but also how much we get back on Earth and will get in the future and have had in the past from space exploration, whether it's your GPS, whether it's your satellites, your phones, Velcro, still got Velcro, the medical treatments that we may see in terms of, impact on radiation, on cancer treatments and you name it, we get a load of this stuff from the space race.
Farming, flood defences, everything else. The survey that happens across the Earth informs where people can put their crops, what crop rotations needed, and everything else. So a lot of the food that we get, space is critical to everything that we do to keep humanity going today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the Greens, we shouldn't have a plan B. This is the only planet we've got. We may need a plan B if we'd end up having an asteroid hurtling at us with an extinction event level of it. I mean, statistically, on average, a major asteroid hits around every 100 years. And if we're lucky when they hit an ocean, or we're lucky when they hit, the middle of Siberia, if one of those hits London and New York or Middle East, we are talking about catastrophic territory in terms of the future of mankind.
Oh, very much so. And the Greens jumping up and down. Most of the green technologies that they keep going have been developed for space. And they're developed there first. And the spin-off, the technological spin-offs of what's developed on Earth to inform the space programs, never mind what is developed in space itself, is phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm sorry. Again, if you don't agree with us, don't believe us, I'd love to hear you call in. Get Andy Lown back on the phone. I think he's got to go and get some sleep at some point, having been following this all night. But give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Let's talk more about Donald Trump, that TV address last night. Really, the most significant thing he said wasn't in that TV address, 20 minutes to the American people, much shorter than his many sort of, North Korean style addresses. But he said yesterday that in an interview that basically he was thinking about minded to take the US out of NATO, set the cat among the pigeons. He's told Europe, go and grab and cherish the Strait of Hormuz. If you want the Strait reopened, that's kind of your problem, Europe. But he also talked about how the war in Iran was on track, possibly another 2 or 3 more weeks, but it's still insisting that Iran had to come to the table or he would bomb them back to the Stone Age. If it's all on track, if everything's gone fine, why does he need them to come to the table? Why can't he just declare victory? And would it be a victory if, and there hasn't been regime change. They got rid of the Ayatollah, loads of top-ranking people, but the same people, the same organisation is basically in charge. Can he in any way declare a victory?
He'll have difficulty, and he'll define what he means by victory. But at the end of the day, military action is an arm of diplomacy. It is setting the conditions for slightly different diplomatic interactions, and therefore people have to come to the table. Whether it is the rump of the old regime, that would be a loss for the United States, or a new regime, as Donald Trump keeps saying. He's talking to the new people, and they're much better. Whether he's getting them into position to take over, and it'll take another few weeks for him to set those conditions from a military perspective for that to happen.
I mean, it was very clear when he first launched the attacks at the end of March that the regime change wasn't one of the things listed. But if the Iranian people wanted to rise up and change the regime, and he's talked about we've changed the regime with having killed the Ayatollah and now his son, apparently injured, possibly in a coma. I mean, look, he's not been seen since he's apparently become Ayatollah. I think we can safely assume he ain't actually in charge right now. But the Iranian people, as we were talking to a defence correspondent a little bit earlier on the show, that they're not rising up. The IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, is 120,000 strong. Oh, goodness me! I've no idea what that noise was. I'm sorry, frightened. I don't know what that was. Apologies for my screaming at you. Hope you weren't driving then. But a very loud noise just suddenly hit the studio. Hope everyone's calm and breathe.
Breathe.
Goodness me, that frightened the living daylights out of me.
Next.
I'm just pleased I didn't swear on air, but there we are. Where were we? Yes, we were saying that there are 120,000 of them, and they are ideological. They're very well armed. Intelligence. We've seen mass slaughtering on the streets of young people protesting in January. People are too afraid to rise up.
And that's the problem at the end of the day. The element of the old regime that is oppressing the people still remains. And whilst that remains, then people can't rise up. And if they can't rise up, they're too scared to. There's between 20 and 50,000 murdered by the Iranian regime only a few weeks before Donald Trump started this campaign. He had promised to come in and support them. This was him coming in to support them. But whilst that element of the regime that murdered those tens of thousands of people still exists, they can't go out in the streets.
No, exactly. But here's the thing. If the Americans just say, well, we've done what we can do, they can walk away and say, look, they've depleted their nuclear capability. But we don't know if they have. And Donald Trump claimed that a year ago anyway, that they said that, in the 12-day war. Well, then why did you have to go back in again? If the Iranians still control the Strait of Hormuz, or can, even if they decide, OK, we're opening it again, but it's their decision. They have then shown that they exercise this ultimate power, which is, OK, we can't actually stop the bombing by the Americans and the Israelis, but at the end of the day, we can hold the rest of the world to ransom. And that economic pressure, not just on Europe and Middle East and many other poorer countries relying on that oil to come out and for fertilizer and everything else, but actually they can hold the American president and all his military might to ransom by the fact that if you push up oil prices and gasoline prices for Americans, you're going to lose the next election. Democratic regimes are very, very susceptible to this sort of economic pressure.
Very, very much so. The Americans have gone in to try and surgically remove a cancer on the globe, which the Iranian regime
which we should support them.
Which we should support in dealing with it. I lost a very good friend. I lost 13 soldiers in Iraq while I was there, down to weapons that came from Iran and orders that came from Iran. They have killed British personnel and friends of mine. So, I think we should remove them. However, if Donald Trump then finishes it with a job only half done, it's like the surgeon only cutting part of a cancer tumour out and leaving the rest in. It'll grow back faster and worse.
And that's the worry, isn't it? I mean, lots of critics call this a war of choice. Is it a war of choice? I mean, the timing is a war of choice. But at some point they were going... At some point we had to take on, and Israel would have done it on their own if necessary, and they've done it before in terms of bombing the nuclear capabilities, the attempts at nuclear ability by the Iranians. At some point we would have no choice. Iran is a nation state that is, the regime is very open about wanting to annihilate some of its neighbours, including Israel.
The timing was a war of choice, but anyone who says it's a war of choice and it's unjustified and all the rest of it, I would ask them just to stand in front of me, and I'll go and get Mike Tyson to come and punch them 140 times. Now, because the Americans got hit by the Iranians or Iranian proxies directly in the region 140 times in the past 12 months. So if you're going to stand there and take 140 punches and not respond back again...
One may not respond back when Tyson's doing
exactly.
it. I think even saying the threat, is enough. We should, shouldn't have to put up with that. I mean, certainly what the Israelis have put up with over the years. It's absolutely fascinating. But do we trust that Donald Trump knows what he's doing? I mean, when he talks about taking the US out of NATO, look, he was right, as we were discussing earlier, to say that Europeans weren't pulling their weight. Wake up call, everybody. You know what? We need to be paying for our own defence. And I was saying earlier, I think it is virtually treasonous the failures to invest in our defence capability. But as we were discussing earlier, also there is, an American president can't unilaterally withdraw the US from NATO. I suppose he can stop, cooperation, but they can't actually be withdrawn without congressional approval. As you were saying, 2/3 of Congress. Now, he's only got just over half right now of both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Very likely after the midterm elections in early November, he won't have a majority, possibly in either house. But either way, even with a majority, he hasn't got 2/3. And many Republicans might vote to stop that from happening. And by the way, his own Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he was the man 10 plus years ago who basically instigated a new law, this vote in Congress, to instigate this 2/3 majority requirement from Congress. So, I mean, we know that his own Secretary of State wouldn't agree to that.
The biggest mistake we make is taking Donald Trump's words literally. Instead of just recognising that Donald Trump comes out with a load of verbal diarrhea, but we have to put it into a wider context. He doesn't talk in diplomatic language, he doesn't talk in political language, but our politicians analyse every word, and our mainstream media analyses every word and takes it as if this is what is going to happen. If we did that, he'd have already invaded Greenland. World War III would have started between the United States and the European element of NATO and Canada coming in, and Vladimir Putin would become the next president of the United States. We don't take him literally.
OK, very, very fair point. Do we take the Prime Minister of this country literally when he talks about how we need to have closer ties with Europe and that all our economic woes are basically down to us? Hey, and this is what he and his coterie actually think is down to Brexit. Small matter of the Ukraine war and that massive bailout. Small matter of COVID pandemic and lockdowns. By the way, he supported all of the spending on that and wanted more. Apparently, that's not the reason why we're in economic problems and the lack of productivity in the public sector, mass importation of cheap labour from the third world and all their dependents. No, nothing to do with that. Problem is, we've not been in the EU since 21. That's why.
Our Prime Minister is much more dangerous than Donald Trump because he's focused on his own little bubble, his own little hyper-political focus where he wants to get us back into Europe again. He wants to look after the left of the Labour Party. He wants to be the new core of socialist policies that are going out across the country, and doesn't care about anything until other people's money runs out. And he won't dip in his own pocket as a multi-millionaire that he is. He's a working class multi-millionaire with.
I mean, he's not a multi. I mean, he's well-to-do. He's been paid very highly for his job. I've got no problem with him making money.
Well, yeah, but
it's not quite sure why anyone would have employed him as a lawyer.
Yes, but why call himself working class and why call his cabinet working class? And they're not. It's complete nonsense.
Why does everyone have to be embarrassed about being middle class? My parents were born working class, and they worked really hard at university. And I'm middle class. My husband's working class. He's born, I know, he was born in Stoke-on-Trent in a housing estate. He's proud of that. I'm proud of my background. We're the only country in the world that get obsessed with this and think it's bad that people have done well for themselves.
We're the only country in the world where people want to aspire to a lower living standard in what they call rather than being socially mobile.
It's just when he pretends to be something he's not.
Europeans don't understand that, but it's symptomatic of the reason why I call him dangerous, because he's lying to us.
Well, he lies
every
to us
opportunity
every
he lies to us.
I do think it's interesting. Rachel Reeves, though, the Chancellor, again, no clue what she's doing, but she apparently, we're here told behind the scenes, is backing restarting drilling, as in new licences in the North Sea, something of a riff with Ed Miliband. I rather think that Ed Miliband, the energy and taking us back to the Stone Age, one wind turbine and solar panel at a time secretary, is actually probably got more control over what happens because he's got so much support on the left of the party and the lunatic left-wing fringe and the Labour Party backbenchers and their activists. Very popular figure. Rachel Reeves got virtually no political authority, and quite rightly. But even she's worked out, the economy is in a terrible state. We've got no energy security. We can't build up our defence. We've completely devastated, under the Tories as well, our defence, energy, security, industrial strategy, you name it, everything has been destroyed by this. And we really do need to have a little bit more energy independence long term. And we need to start drilling in the North Sea and getting, by the way, some of those rather useful tax receipts, which Norway is getting when we buy our oil and gas from them. From the same North Sea wells that we could be exploiting. She's worked out that she's the one who's going to get the blame. She's going to be the one who's out the door. Do you think she's any chance of vaguely winning that battle, given that Keir Starmer appears to double down at every opportunity on net zero?
Well, I don't know what sort of control Ed Milliwatt has got over Keir Starmer, but it's good to see that Rachel Reeves has finally taken a common sense pill. What we need to do is make sure that she can hand those pills out around the rest of the cabinet and find some way of isolating Milliwatt, because he's dangerous.
But again, Keir Starmer's one who appointed him. I mean, as far as I can tell, they're fully signed up. And again, I don't think Miliband or Starmer, either of them, have a clue at all what's going on.
Well, after next month, we're not going to Starmer around.
Well, you say that. I mean, there's a lot of talk. We've got the local elections and the Welsh elections, Scottish elections on the 7th of May. And there's a lot of talk because I think that's on the Friday. And then on the next Wednesday, we've got the state opening of Parliament. Yeah. A lot of people are saying that, that buys Starmer some time because we won't get a lot of results. They don't even start counting until the Friday, the 8th of May. Some of the counts don't start until the afternoon on the Friday. So a lot of the results won't get until later in the day, Saturday. And then, the plotting will start, depending on how bad the results are. But if MPs aren't in the Commons on the Monday and the Tuesday and they're not plotting there, but then, of course, they would be with their own activists back in their own constituencies, that might be more pressure on them, whether or not that buys him some time.
Well, they'll be plotting through their little WhatsApp groups, and if they're not back in Parliament, then the whips are going to have much more difficulty keeping control of it, and therefore there's a greater chance that all these elements are going to come and really attack him as soon as he gets in. And if that just happens to be before or just after the King's speech, it'll be a disaster for him and disaster for the country.
Well, interesting. For Reform UK, I mean, all of the parties on massive, election manoeuvres right now. But Nigel Farage does press conference, as far as I can tell, most days. And he has, alongside Robert Jenrick, his Treasury spokesperson, a former Tory, of course, he has pledged that Reform UK would keep the triple lock for state pensions, saying the party could afford it, he says, many, many times over, thanks to the plan to cut welfare, and he said that they're going to be unveiling that in the next 2 weeks' time. He defended his previous ambivalence about the policy. Of course, the triple lock guarantees increase in pension every year in line with inflation, earnings, or 2.5%, whichever is the highest. So you've got a minimum 2.5% increase in pensions, and we've seen that was all basically brought in after Gordon Brown had, was it a 15p a week or something rise in pensions at a time when many pensioners were really struggling, at a time when actually pensioners have been far more protected than many young people and working families in recent years, that actually a lot of people feel that is no longer sustainable. We've got far more people claiming their pensions, far more people living much longer, and we've got a lot of young people who are really struggling. But realistically, a party that's got a lot of support among older people, a lot of older Brexiteers, it was never politically tenable for Reform to drop the pensions triple lock, was it?
No, it wasn't. And there needs to be some form of pension reform, because at the minute, those that are paying in for their pensions, who are now finding that they're having to work longer to keep paying in and everything else, are paying for those people who have never paid in anything to society, and therefore our whole benefit system needs to be dealt with.
But one of the big things that keep, I mean, again, I don't want any pensioner to be living in poverty at all. No. I don't think people should be penalised because they bother to save and be responsible over the years. But you have got a situation where most people say, you get this again and again, I've paid in all my life. Unless you were a top rate taxpayer or a higher rate taxpayer, you've absolutely not paid enough to cover your pension, and certainly not for 30 years of retirement, as many people will be having 20, 30 years. But also, crucially, that money that you paid in national insurance, that money was going on day-to-day spending by the government at the time. And your pension right now is being paid for out of taxes being paid this year. But people have been told a policy. But that said, you've got young people who can never afford to pay off student debt, never afford to buy a home, and paying for pensioners who've got a deal which is far better than anything they will ever hope to get. Yeah,
but this is where your government policy is ridiculous. Setting the conditions for business not to employ more people, and putting more businesses out of business. Because of the costs that are coming in. So there's going to be less taxpayers, there's going to be more people who benefit, there's going to be less people to pay the pensions that are coming in.
Exactly. I mean, it's madness, isn't it?
Madness.
The answer, of course, is just bringing in loads of people on low wages from the third world. Oh, no, it's not, it turns out. But crucially, Nigel Farage basically saying they have got enough money to pay for this, because they're going to have huge benefits cut to the... I mean, again, you could take away... I'm quite sure that we could all sit on a panel and go, no, you don't need it. No, your anxiety is not enough to justify not working. The question is, will there be the jobs for that? But we cannot continue to spend a fortune on people of working age who are not working. End of. Full stop.
Well, there are other jobs, because it'll stop us then having to bring people in from other countries.
Talking of people getting old, talking of ancient relics.
Me again.
I'm very excited. We finally got the picture. I'm very excited about this. I've got my own dinosaur. Yes, genuinely. And not an April Fool. I said this to my family last night. They assumed it was an April Fool. No, absolutely not. The Juliasaurus, I kid you not, a new dinosaur species, well, they believe to be a different species, has been discovered, and the bones of this species are going on display at a museum, I think, in Colchester. And this is an art. I'm showing you, if you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, the Juliasaurus is an artist's rendition that's been shown in the Times newspaper today of what that dinosaur looks like. I have to say, I'm going with an uncanny resemblance, I have to say. It looks like a bit like a small T-Rex. Works for me, but apparently, as someone pointed out on social media yesterday, most cabinet ministers would rather be interviewed by that than by me, which is why they're too fit to come on these days. Anyway, love to hear from you on all the topics we are talking about, including, we didn't get to it in this hour, but Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, saying that London is a safe city despite those rampaging youths in Clapham 2 nights in a row. Kemi Badenoch explained it on a lack of discipline and consequences. What do you blame it on? Give us a call on that and all the other topics we are talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
10, 9, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
Integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:27 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 and your messages indeed as well. Those of you getting in touch on Twitter and on text about Donald Trump's reaction to pull the US out of NATO. Your reaction to that? I don't blame him, says Brian. He sees China as the biggest threat, not Russia, which was the original reason for NATO. It would be a proper kick up the backside for Europe. Teddy says, in my opinion, recent Trump speeches show he's deteriorating mentally and fast. I have to say, I think the fact that he just says different things in different hours is a concern. Jane says NATO is 77 years old and no longer fit for purpose. The world has changed beyond recognition since 1949. We need to take care of ourselves militarily. Jen says the erratic and spiteful Trump is a fool in his attempt to isolate the US from its allies. Dictators like Putin, Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping would love a weakened West. Very, very fair point. America's lots of Americans' capability actually does come from having the ally alliance with the Europeans over the Atlantic. Let's go to your calls now about lots of different topics, actually. Heather is in Govan and wants to... Was it Govan? Tell me how to pronounce that, Heather.
It's Govan.
Govan. Sorry.
Govan in Scotland.
I knew it was in Scotland. That's why I knew as soon as I started saying it, I'd get it wrong. But you want to talk about what's been going on in Clapham, just to let people who haven't been paying attention the last couple of days. For 2 nights in a row, we had marauding teenagers giggling, thinking it's an absolute who, smashing into shops, looting, marauding around, mob rule basically in Clapham High Street. The police getting called in. They've got extra police presence last night and continuing. But Kemi Badenoch has said, look, this is about lack of discipline, lack of consequences. We've had a few arrests, but people are pretty unhappy about it. We've had Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, say London is safe. What do you make of it?
Well, Kemi Badenoch is right on that. There's a lack of discipline and a lack of consequences. And one thing I'm going to say about that is they don't understand what consequences is. When you make mistakes, you've got to face your own consequences. I mean, Julia, me and you, we're same age. I'm 56. You're 57. We were brought
up don't rub it in.
Of the 60s. We were brought up with tough love from our parents. If we did anything wrong, we got a smack. If we did that back in the 70s and 80s when we were teenagers, we would get a right good hiding from our parents.
I'm not personally in favour of hitting kids. I think at the point you hit your kids, you probably failed. However, you certainly were scared of your parents finding out if you'd done something wrong. And you were scared of the police. And you were scared of your teachers.
Exactly. We were scared of the police as well, because the police back in the 70s and the 80s, they were proper police officers. And one thing that we need in this country, boot camp for teenagers.
I'm with you. I'm with you all the way.
And I want to speak to Philip about that. Do you agree on that, Philip?
Just going to ask him.
100%. I think boot camp for teenagers to get a bit of military discipline, and this is where things like scouts, cadets, a lot of youth societies again are the sorts of things that kids should be put through instead of sitting out in the streets. That would give them a degree of discipline and respect for authority.
Yeah, because like in America, they've got boot camp in America.
Yeah. Well, we've got lots of different states have lots of different issues, don't they? Lots of different ways of dealing with this. I'm with you all the way, but again, I think fundamentally it always comes down to parenting, whoever it is. And again, a lot of people talk about the race of those who were rioting and background and things like that. Again, I just said, regardless of who it is, and the same as I would say, the Southport with the rioters, vast majority of those people who were actually caught doing this, not demonstrating on the streets, protesting legitimately, but people who were throwing bricks, causing trouble, making threats, they were actually people with criminal records already. And basically the absolute breakdown of the family, breakdown of just consequences. Again, even it comes down to the benefit system, doesn't it? There's no consequences to not bothering to work. You don't work. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. Heather, so appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Chris is in Epsom. Chris, you want to talk about the fact that Keir Starmer, as I was saying, is basically, and we talked about it on the show yesterday, is basically saying, our solutions to all our economic problems where we're facing with these, whether it's, the Iran and Strait of Hormuz or whatever, is basically getting closer ties to the EU. Do you think he's right?
Well, first of all, morning, Philip and Julia.
Morning. You got a name check before me. Favouritism.
Congratulations on your space interview. Andrew was excellent.
Isn't he wonderful?
Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you. I was 8 years old and I remember sitting and watching the first moon landing on the black and white rediffusion TV with 3 buttons on the front of it.
Yeah. Have you ever explained to your kids, by the way, that you grew up with only 3 TV channels? Because mine looked at me thinking I was just taking the mick. She thought it was a joke.
Well, actually, my son, I'll get to the real topic in a minute. Yes. My Sunday treat with my younger brother is no longer with us, rest in peace. On a Sunday, my father would carry the TV from the back room in our 2-bedroom maisonette in Fulham and put it in the lounge in the front room, and we would be able to watch Match of the Day. And as the titles came on, he'd turn the TV off, take the TV back and chuck us out the room for the rest of the week.
harsh. But that was parenting in those days. Anyway, let's talk about the issue you called up about.
This is really serious and very, very frightening. You've got to link these things together. Yep. First of all, you got the Ginger Growler saying she wants to do away with immigration rules.
Sorry.
Yeah. Then you've got Emily Thornberry saying that all immigrants should get a house.
Yeah.
Then you've got Starmer reducing the payment to France from 500 million to 200 million. And you've got the EU, by the way, not removing any of the draws that you always talk about, Julia. You're quite right, the housing and the money and everything else. And then you've got the EU just taking a vote on arrest, detention and deportation. So where are they all going to come? The English Channel this summer is going to be like Charing Cross on a Monday morning.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're just, come on in, the water's lovely. I mean, that's the reality. I don't know why we're even bothering having any sort of patrols in the channel at all at this rate.
It's totally ludicrous. And Starmer is doing it obviously to support his Muslim vote, which he thinks he's going to keep, but he's not, because they've switched over to the Greens, because those useless idiots have not looked at the history, but it's the leftists that joined the Islamists in many of the countries that are now Islamic, like Iran, and in the first week after the Ayatollah arrived back, he executed 3,000 of them.
Yeah, they never learn the lesson, do they? It's like the quiz for Palestine. Off you toddle. I'm sure you'll have a lovely time there in the last few days of your life. Chris, thank you very much. Covered a lot of ground there. Chris in Epsom there. 11:35 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking to Republican strategist Matt Terrell about what Donald Trump has had to say about NATO and, where we are with the Iran war and what, frankly, can the Europeans do to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. We're also going to be talking about the latest crisis at the BBC. I mean, no, not a new one. It's just the usual latest one. But also why ITV are looking at a drama about the life of Elizabeth I, one of our greatest monarchs, who was, of course, in their view, wait for it, trans. Deep breaths, everybody. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:38 is the time. Just to get you up to date, a couple of bits of breaking news. You'll remember that just horrific story in Yorkshire where a funeral director had been charged with preventing the burials of 30 bodies and stealing donations to charities by mourners. Just horrific case. Well, Robert Bush, arrested by the police, and they investigated the Hull-based Legacy Independent Funeral Directors following a report of concern for care of the deceased back in March of 2024, so more than 2 years ago. He has now pleaded guilty. He's admitted preventing the burials of those bodies. He's been bailed until a later date, but he's been already told by the judge in the case that a custodial sentence is inevitable. Also, Reform UK, who have been, the leader, Nigel Farage, and his Treasury spokesman, Robert Jenrick, they have been announcing that they are committed to the pensions triple lock for older voters. Obviously, a lot of those being Reform voters, much higher voting, basically older people are for Reform, saying they can fund it basically from a massive load of welfare cuts and other cuts. But Reform UK's housing spokesman, Simon Dudley, I believe he has actually resigned, has he not? Or there are calls for him to resign, but I believe he has actually resigned. Can someone correct me? Simon Dudley certainly been called to resign by the Tories after some comments he made about the Grenfell fire. An interview with Inside Housing magazine. So he has actually been sacked, yeah, I've just been told. He described building safety regulations introduced since the Grenfell tragedy as regulation which is not working. In his words, he said, "That was a tragedy. It was a failure. Sadly, everyone dies in the end. It's just how you go, right? Extracting Grenfell from the statistics, actually people dying in house fires is rare. Many, many more people die on the roads driving cars, but we're not making cars illegal. So why are we stopping houses being built?" Well, the Grenfell United group of bereaved families and survivors has basically said that those figures, those comments were unacceptable. Nigel Farage has indeed sacked him. Again, poor choice of words. Never a big fan of people being sacked for saying their views, but certainly a very poor choice of words. I kind of understand the point he was trying, but desperately failing to make. But another figure gone from that front bench. Right now, let's turn our attention to someone who often says things we're not quite sure about, and often says very crass things, and then says things that completely contradict those 5 minutes later. But Donald Trump gave an address to the US people last night on television. Interesting night to choose when everyone was really focused on that rocket launch, the Artemis 2 rocket launch to around the moon. But he had earlier threatened to pull the US out of NATO the hours beforehand, but did not mention that at any point in his 20-minute address, which largely said very, very little, and certainly just seemed to be reiterating points he's already made on social media and interviews. But was it just a nut and burger, or was there something we should take out from that speech in terms of what is going to happen in the future in terms of American policy towards not just Iran, but towards his European allies as well? Well, let's talk to Matt Terrell. He's a Republican strategist and indeed a former advisor to Marco Rubio before he was Secretary of State to Donald Trump. Good morning to you, Matt. Appreciate you joining us.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Was it a nothing burger, or was it significant that he didn't repeat this threat to pull the US out of NATO?
Well, it's certainly not a nothing burger, and I think that NATO and countries around the world need to be paying attention to what President Trump is doing here. I think the first step of what he wants to do is, of course, have a win here with this war in Iran. Talked last night in that speech about winding things down here, if you will, over the next few weeks, and the success that the United States has been having with respect to the war in Iran. But I think after this war ends, over the next few weeks, expect for President Trump and his team to address the relationship that the United States has with NATO. I think what President Trump is coming in on this is that the United States is the biggest funder of NATO, and this moment
by a long
where
way.
the United States needed support, they didn't have it from NATO.
Yeah, it did. Well, again, but you know as well as I do that under Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, an attack on one is an attack on all. Actually, rather alarmingly, doesn't require member states to actually come to their aid militarily. But crucially, it excludes, what people are calling a war of choice in Iran. It excludes main territory. So, for instance, when Argentina invaded the Falklands, there was no duty of NATO to help Britain in defending the Falklands. So there is no requirement legally under NATO to, as there was on the Iraq War, to help the Americans. And likewise, no duty of Americans to help defend Ukraine against Russia because they weren't in NATO. It's a bit of an unfair argument by the US president, isn't it? Even if diplomatically, I would argue we were crazy not to allow US to use the Diego Garcia base.
Well, look, I think where the president's at on this, where Americans nationwide, many of them are at on this, is look, this should not be about what the law says or not, the bylaws, if you will, of NATO. This should be about having a strong partnership, an alliance with countries within NATO. And to that end, this is not a war of choice. This is a war of necessity. We've seen how close Iran was to being able to have a nuclear capability. We saw them lie about the distance that their missiles could be launched. And we saw that with the missiles being launched towards Diego Garcia.
Yeah.
The truth is, Europe in particular faces a threat from Iran. The ability for Iran to launch missiles that would reach places like London and Paris. We saw that with respect to the distance that these missiles that Iran launched recently against Diego Garcia went. So, look, the truth is, the United States, along with Israeli forces, have been doing a fantastic job with respect to annihilating the Iranian regime. The United States, Israel were winning this war. But the truth is, I think what the president wanted to see was NATO allies step up, particularly relates to the Strait of Hormuz. Because, look, the United States doesn't get much of anything out of the Strait of Hormuz, but Asia does and Europe does. And so I think it's important for those countries to step up. I think it's disappointing to see countries like Spain not allow the United States to use its airspace, for example. That's not acceptable.
Well, there's a lot of posturing, isn't there, and a lot of pandering to the left in European politics, and indeed to the large now Muslim vote as well on this issue. This is massively dividing European nations. I agree with you. I agree it's a war of necessity, and the timing is an issue of judgment. But at some point, Iran were going to have to be taken on. The proof that Iran could close the Strait of Hormuz, on a whim, is proof of absolutely how necessary it was that we can take on Iran before they get a nuclear weapon. I agree with you on that. However, do you think that actually Donald Trump undermines himself with his wild remarks, his route statements, talking about, bombing Iran back into the Stone Age, threatening the other day to bomb, every energy facility and even desalination plants? You're talking about basically, totally destroying a nation and civilian infrastructure that's absolutely vital to people, not just living a normal life in the 21st century, but to being alive when so many countries in the Middle East would be under attack from Iran for that, and their desalination plants, which are absolutely vital for their survival as well. Do you think that he has been reckless in his rhetoric, even if the aims of the war and the carrying out of the war methods have actually been fair enough, have been legitimate?
Well, I think he's been the opposite in the sense of being strong in his rhetoric. I think what you saw last night was him hit the right tones in that speech. Saying
he's going to bomb Iran back to the Stone Age. That's...
Well, look, I think what he is saying is you have a choice for those who are left in the regime, like the fourth tier, if you will, because so many tiers of the regime have been destroyed by so many levels, if you will, by the United States and Israeli forces. What he is trying to say here is, look, you've got a choice to make for those left in the regime. Come to the table and do what's necessary to get this war to come to an end. Otherwise, we're going to go full throttle in terms of what we need to do for our military capability to decimate you. And I think as for the people of Iran, the way I think they see this is that President Trump has done what no other president was willing to do. And that is open a door for them to take back their country. We talk about the people of Iran and their ability to live. This is a regime that has killed thousands and thousands of its own people. This is a regime that's killed military individuals from the United States.
Yeah.
So, look, the truth is, I think President Trump sees this as a moment to end this war. This war will come to an end. It will be a success for the United States, Israel, and for the world, because I think Iran will not have the capability, of course, to have a nuclear capability. And on top of that, this does come down to, I think, President Trump wanting to give the Iranian regime an off-ramp. It is up to them to take that. There's going to be a series of I think, concessions and things that need to be done from the regime, giving up 60% of enrichment of uranium, opening up the Strait of Hormuz, knocking off the games, if you will. It's up to the regime at the end of the day to do that. And if they don't, I think President Trump's going to go full throttle.
Going back just finally and very briefly on the issue of NATO withdrawal, we know that that's not something the American president now can actually make as a unilateral decision. He relies on a 2/3 vote of approval in Congress. That was something that was actually brought in by Marco Rubio, your former boss, now the Secretary of State. You must know Marco very well, very personally. He wouldn't be in favour of withdrawal from NATO, would he?
Well, we'll see what President Trump does. I think you're going to see him do something here. I don't know what that will be quite yet. None of us do. But the truth is, it could be, I suspect what it could be, potentially, and I'll let the administration make their own choice and speak for themselves, but a review of how many troops the United States has in NATO countries. Do we redeploy those troops to other places around the world?
Yeah, there are huge numbers in Germany and elsewhere, aren't there?
There are. There are, and the truth is, I think there's going to be something done here. And you are seeing, of course, the Secretary General of NATO come to the United States here soon. I think he has a good relationship with the President.
The Trump whisperer, as he's known. We shall wait and see. Matt Terrell, always great to talk to you. Republican strategist, former advisor to Marco Rubio, now the US Secretary of State. Philip, we've talked about this a lot. So one final question to you, really briefly. The King's State visit going ahead later this month. Should that go ahead?
Yes, I think it should.
Why?
Because His Majesty the King is you're the head of state for the United Kingdom. We've got a problem with the head of state of the United States. The King is the ultimate diplomat. And people say he doesn't get involved in politics. Of course he gets involved in politics because he's a weapon system to be used by our elected politicians.
The government decides these trips. But also it's about the American independence,
and we should help them celebrate their independence from the UK. Definitely.
Very true. 11:49 is time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to the wonderful Rafe Hadel-Manku about what's going on at the BBC and what the heck is going on at ITV, who are going to do a brand new drama all about the life of one of our greatest monarchs, Elizabeth I. And of course, she, not they, them, is going to be trans. This is Talk.
RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
Integrity, AMT high.
on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your...
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's funny, coming up to 11:53, delighted to be welcome Rafe Hadel-Manku, a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, to the show to talk about both the BBC and ITV today. A very good morning to you, Rafe.
Always a pleasure, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about the BBC first of all, because this is the final day for Tim Davie, the outgoing Director General. We've got the new one coming in from Google. I mean, they look like they could be separated at birth, those two. They've got a type, haven't they, for their BBC Directors General. But obviously trying to sort of basically clean out all the difficulties and all the problems before he went by sacking Scott Mills, who was the Radio 2 breakfast show host, over these very sort of historical claims against him involving sexual offences alleged, never actually charged, never prosecuted, never convicted, with an under 16-year-old boy. And the revelations of what the BBC knew and when have been dragged out of them, kicking and screaming, haven't they? They now say they were aware of the probe back in 2017, but unaware that it was an under 16-year-old. But they seem to say something different every day.
There are too many questions around all of this. And, firstly, we can forgive any institution for having the occasional bad apple, but the BBC seems to be cultivating an orchard of these characters. But as you say, the focus now isn't on Scott Mills, it's on the BBC and this, this culture of silence and cover-up. And they do need to come out and explain why now suddenly they got rid of him, and they got rid of him so quickly. Because, the police did investigate. They decided there wasn't enough evidence to bring charges. So what was it that made the BBC act? Is it just because he had a conversation with a minor? Is that it? Or is it something more serious?
Well, we're told that there was new evidence that came to light, but we know there was more evidence that came to light a year ago, and a lot of this, the timing of his last show was on the day that the Hugh Edwards docudrama on Channel 5 had aired, which I think opened a lot of people's eyes to, what the hell had really been going on with Hugh Edwards and what a controlling manipulator, groomer and sex abuser he was. That's what he was. He wasn't just some bloke asking for some photos and giving some cash to some teenage lad. He was really, and remains an appalling human being, quite apart from the pictures of children being raped and goodness knows what on his phone that he apparently didn't think were an issue, for which he actually got convicted and never went behind bars for. But this is the thing, there does seem that the BBC knew a long time ago. Did they have full information? What came out now? Have they just overreacted this time about an allegation for which, as far as we're aware, there isn't, certainly not, the police claim not enough proof to take to court, no actual charges brought, or was there enough evidence that may not have been, beyond reasonable doubt, but balance of probabilities? This is the thing, but we don't know. And Scott Mills issued a statement yesterday, not shedding any light on it at all.
And this is the thing, all the questions you've asked are the same questions everyone has.
Yeah.
And we need to have answers because we are the co-owners of the BBC.
Thank you.
It is our institution. We need greater transparency from this. If they want to justify the continuance of the licence fee, they need to come clearer. But and as you said, they had a tip-off a year ago, almost a year ago. Why was nothing done about that? Now, it may well have been that it was this Hugh Edwards drama that actually caused somebody to say, you know what, I'm going to speak up about this and reveal something new about Scott Mills. Maybe, but we don't know. No. And this is just what you get all the time. There's no proper investigation. No awkward questions are asked within the BBC. There's no safeguarding urgency here. No. It's just silence and more of this attempt to just basically defend their talent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just extraordinary. ITV are also not covering themselves in glory, are they? They put out an advert for young actors and actresses to come forward to play basically a central role in a new series titled Majesty, in which the monarch of Elizabeth I, one of our greatest ever monarchs, the Tudor Queen, is going to be played. They say they want her to be played by a transgender woman. They say it's far from a historical account. It's an intriguing reimagining of her life based upon conspiracy theories. This whole idea, because she never married. She said she was married to the country, and the Virgin Queen supposedly, that basically all these conspiracy theories over the years from basically lunatic academics in recent years, suggesting that she must have been trans, or she must have been a man in disguise, when in fact she was just a strong woman. But they're now going to have basically want a man to play her. Because God forbid she couldn't just have been a strong female character. Is there anything that isn't sacred?
No, I mean, what a grotesque farce. I mean, what's next? They're going to be putting a drama saying that Winston Churchill was a butch lesbian or something like that. I
mean, don't give them ideas, Rafe.
There's enough ignorance around history in this country already. I mean, shocking ignorance about our past. What we need are more historical dramas that accurately portray and celebrate our great achievements, rather than this sort of conspiratorial rubbish, which many people are going to believe. You know, much like The Crown, when The Crown came out, a lot of it was fictionalized. But if you speak to people in this country, particularly in America and Canada, they think everything was accurate, like a documentary. And of course, if you're a feminist as well, or if you just believe that women can be powerful people, how outrageous that once again you've got here the trans radical lobbies trying to take away anything around feminism.
Yeah, I mean, Joan of Arc, another classic, you know, French hero, you know, sainted, you know, must have been trans. I mean, dressed as a man, because that's what you had to do to not get, you know, raped when you're travelling around on your own through France in those years. But this is the thing: there isn't like a strong female character they won't try and take, and it's absolutely fine. You get a white man to play a black character, they will lose their freaking minds. You're allowed to imagine anything other than that.
Yeah, and what gets me, of course, is that the target audience that watches television now are people who are older than us, right? That is people who are pensioners, retired, or people in their 50s, 60s. They're not the ones who are going to be wanting to watch this sort of a thing.
The blue-haired brigade with the nose rings ain't going to watch it.
Why are you driving away and antagonizing your core audience at a time when you're already hemorrhaging viewership? It's absolute madness.
But also, yet another role for a young woman. And I thought, why do they need to be trans anyway? I mean, seriously, couldn't they act it if they wanted to? Rafe Hadel-Mankiw, always love you coming on Talking Sense. Up next, this is the news. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
very good afternoon to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Awful lot to talk about on the show. We've been talking an awful lot about what's been going on with Donald Trump's threat to pull the US out of NATO, but he didn't mention that in his address to the US people in his TV address last night. The London Mayor Sadiq Khan claiming the capital is safe despite gangs of youths causing mayhem in Clapham 2 nights in a row. Only stopped because they basically sent the police in en masse. Rachel Reeves apparently privately is going back to new licences for drilling in the North Sea. Ooh, a bit of a riff with Ed Miliband there, but who's going to win? Ed Miliband is the answer to that, and certainly not sanity. But also, Sir Mark Rowley, the most senior police chief in the country, the Met Police chief, has said that scrapping non-crime hate incidents has enabled officers to solve more real crimes. They were always able to do that. I would definitely have prioritised crimes over non-crimes, certainly, Met Chief. But also, by the way, you're not doing away with them at all. It's a load of abject nonsense, and we'll talk about all of that coming up over the next hour. Delighted to say, still joining me in the studio is Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. We have spoken a lot on the show about Donald Trump. We have spoken an awful lot about the Artemis rocket launch. You and I fully in favour. If you did miss a conversation about, 10:45 with our favourite space boffin, space expert Andy Lound in the studio explaining why you should care about that rocket launch, not because it's going to go round the moon. And it's the start of the 21st century space exploration that mankind should have been doing a long time ago. This is going to be an absolute game changer in our lifetimes, certainly in our children's lifetimes, and we are going to reap the benefits of this over the many decades ahead and centuries ahead. You really should go back and have a look at it. If you want to have a look at it, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. But we certainly, you and I are both as enthusiastic about this as each other, aren't we?
Oh, very much so. And my eyes lit up last night as I saw the rocket taking.
You were like a little boy listening to Andy Lound in the studio.
Very much so. And it took me back to my childhood. I remember the Apollo launches and the first moon landings. I was 4 years old watching the first moon landing in 1969. Therefore, I'm giving my age away.
Just that
and it's fascinating.
I don't remember it. But anyway, look, lots of you getting in touch about Donald Trump. Lots of you getting in touch about one of the other topics we'll turn to in the next few moments about these marauding youths in Clapham. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly of Donald Trump threatening to pull out the US out of NATO. Keir Starmer trying to take us back into the EU by the back door. Marauding youths. Why is that happening? Why aren't the police taking it seriously? Well, certainly not for the first 2 nights. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about all the big topics. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Philip, I'm going to bring you back in though just before we go to my next guest, because I thought it was unfair having that conversation about the BBC and Scott Mills and the mess they're in there, but also the conversation about an ITV drama which is going to be about Elizabeth I, one of our greatest queens in history, fought off the Spanish Armada, incredibly strong figure, and basically a new drama that's going to be about her called Majesty, and they've already sent out an advert looking for the person who's going to play the titular role, and it is someone they want to be trans, because they're playing along with some of the conspiracies and the theories that Elizabeth I wasn't a woman but was a trans woman. What they mean was a man pretending to be a woman. Utterly painful, isn't it, that this stuff is still going on?
Completely painful, and it's an insult, as you said, to strong women. And also our mainstream media channels, whether they're producing drama or whether they're producing the news, need to realise that they influence more than they inform, and they're not creating a debate that's out there. We live in a society where people pick up stuff from little sound bites that come through social media, and therefore whenever they put that out, they're going to get idiots around the world who are going to believe them. And they're going to take this as gospel and take this as history.
It's bad enough they're saying Winston Churchill was a racist who started the Second World War. I mean, the abject and the fact that we're responsible for all slavery that's ever happened. I mean, the lies that are put out, the BBC even worse, because we have to pay for them, and they're putting out lies, and they always say we're leading a debate. You're not leading a debate. No, you are actually trying to change facts,
trying to change history, and we've seen that lead to disorder on the streets, and statues been taken down, and vandalism, our police are having to deal with it. People are getting injured. It's only a matter of time before someone gets killed because of this. We need our mainstream media to sit up and recognise that they have a responsibility to be accurate in what they do, whether that's from a drama drama perspective or in the news.
But also, again, it's how the rules are always so different, and it's about, playing of women. Again, blackface, totally unacceptable. A white actor playing a role that could be played by a black or mixed race character, no, absolutely not. Straight character playing gay characters playing straight characters, fine. At any time, anyone can play a woman, because women definitely don't matter. Fed up with it.
Let ITV get me to play Nelson Mandela and just see what
exactly.
happens then.
I mean, that's the thing. Oh, that'd be outrageous. Oh, it's all about the power. It's all about the power. Oh, let's just forget women's treatment over the many centuries. That's why Queen Elizabeth I stands out as this incredible character. The fact that she was able, just through birth, to have that power. Anyway.
Maggie Thatcher's trans is next.
Oh, don't. Christ, I keep saying stop giving them dumb ideas. Let's talk to my next guest. Well, I want to talk about very important, serious things, but I have a funny feeling he's got his view on this as well. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online. Good afternoon to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
Hello. Have you got a thought on this? Because I'm sure this is the sort of thing that makes your blood boil as well.
Not content with spreading misogyny in the present, they're now going to project it into the past.
Thank you.
Robbing one of the best-known women in history, one of the most impactful women in British history, robbing of her of her true sex and turning her into a man in a dress. I mean, it's just sexist, drivel, woke nonsense. It really is.
God, I love Brendan. As always, thank you so much. Let's talk about drivel. Let's talk about Donald Trump. TV address on Iran last night, 20 minutes, much shorter than the Kim Jong-un style, State of the Union address. They go on for ages and ages. He didn't say anything new. He basically sort of, put together a load of his previous Truth Social posts and odd comments and interviews. He talked about 2 or 3 more weeks of the Iran war. He talked about the war being on track. He talked about bombing Iran back to the Stone Age. He'd made a threat about tackling energy plants and even desalination plants. But he also made no mention of a threat he'd made earlier in the day yesterday of threatening to take the US out of NATO. What did you make of his speech, and what should we read into it?
Well, isn't it interesting that he left out the NATO thing, which really makes me think that that was a bit of a temper tantrum on his part when he said that he was just saying, look, I'm sick of NATO, I'm out. But it wasn't actually official, or it certainly didn't get into his address to the nation. So it's interesting that he left that part out. I understand his frustration with NATO and his frustration with his European partners, because there has been an over-reliance on America to protect Europe, to look after our security, to look after us, to deal with a real threat like the Islamic Republic, while we've got Keir Starmer saying, well, I can't be bothered getting involved. It's nothing to do with us. So I understand Trump's frustration. I really do. But at the same time, I don't think it's helpful for him to suddenly blurt out, I'm leaving NATO, or I'm thinking about it, because that does cause a bit of pandemonium in world affairs. So he's got to be careful with what he says, even though he has some legitimate grievances.
This is the difficulty, isn't it? Because a lot of people, critics say, basically anything that Donald Trump does. I mean, if Donald Trump cured, a world hunger and about entire world peace, they'd still criticise it because it was Donald Trump. And a lot of people still fuming that he managed to get, to negotiate the Gaza peace plan. OK, we haven't got peace as such in Gaza, but those hostages came home. He managed to pull off something which I don't think, anyone thought he could do. I think you and I are both very disappointed with him over Ukraine, although I think as to be expected, certainly before his election. But in terms of this war, the idea that it's a war of choice, that phrase keeps being used, and it's America's war, nothing to do with us, totally unnecessary, warmongering and offensive attack by the Americans on Iran. I think all of that is abject nonsense. But he doesn't help himself, and he doesn't help his cause with his rhetoric, does he?
Yeah. No, he doesn't, because you're absolutely right. This is not an unprovoked war, which is what the left says, and a lot of the media says it as well. The Islamic Republic provoked this war by continually attacking our ally of Israel. They had sent their proxies to invade Israel on 7th of October. By the way, on 7th of October, 18 British citizens were killed.
Yeah.
18 British, most of them Jews. So when Starmer says this is nothing to do with us, I'm afraid that's a lie.
Yeah.
This is something to do with us, because the Islamic Republic funded the murder of our citizens 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And they obviously sent Hezbollah to attack Israel as well. So this war was started by the regime in Iran. There's no question of that. So I think it is legitimate for America and Israel to join forces to try and do something about the Islamic regime. But you're right, Trump doesn't help himself with his rhetoric. And when he says we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Ages, I'm sorry, but that does bring to mind the kind of worst excesses of neocon actions in the early 1990s, when they often used language like that. And it didn't help their cause, and it's not going to help Trump's cause either.
No, indeed, it does undermine it. And in terms of Europe's reaction, we've got quite a lot of it doesn't seem to be based on, including our own Prime Minister, based on him saying he patted himself on the back at his own press conference yesterday morning, Keir Starmer, talking about the calm, clear leadership that he's had. I don't think it's remotely calm. I don't think it's remotely clear, and I don't think it's leadership. It seems to me he's just by accident while dithering fell on a policy that largely the British people aren't offended by not really helping, not getting involved, but sort of getting involved. Not that we had a choice, because RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus was bombed by the Iranians anyway, whether we'd allowed the US to use Diego Garcia Base or not. But it seems to me the Brits, French, Spanish, there's a lot of posturing on whether we help in Iran, and a lot of this is about pandering to leftists at home, the large Muslim contingent vote at home, rather than about our actual national and strategic and global interests.
Absolutely right. And, this is one of the great geopolitical emergencies of our time. And Starmer doesn't seem to have a clear position on it. He wants to sit it out and just, twiddle his thumbs while this all takes place, without realizing that the future of the region does impact on us, because we've got people on the streets of the UK openly cheering for the victory of the Iranian regime. We had the attack in Golders Green just a week or so ago, which some reports say that might be linked to Iran. We have to wait for more information. We know that Iranians have been arrested in London over the past few weeks on suspicion of spying on Jewish institutions on behalf of the Islamic Republic. So Starmer says he doesn't want to be dragged into this war. I'm sorry, you are being dragged into it already by the mullahs in Tehran, who hate Britain as much as they hate America and as much as they hate Israel. So we can't afford just to sit on our hands and say, nothing to do with us, Governor. I'm afraid it does have something to do with us. And the fact that Starmer can't even make a position on it, far less take any action, I think is a real indictment of his government.
Indeed, and whether or not we're involved or not, we don't really have a choice in terms of the fallout of the war, in terms of the economic costs. Warnings that we could be seeing, an extra, was it £440 hike on our energy bills this summer? Yes, it's gone down by 100 odd quid on the average bill as of yesterday because of the Ofgem price cap. But after July, all bets are off. Does this war end in a couple of weeks or not? Well, all of the oil that hasn't got out and the future lack of oil capacity because of the bombing of energy facilities, that, and if the Straits of Hormuz aren't immediately reopened, we're going to be looking at a backlog. We haven't actually begun to feel the effects of that yet, but we have seen it in the price rises. We're seeing it in stock market falls. We're seeing it in future energy hiking in costs. Every time Donald Trump opens his mouth, we see a difference in the price of a barrel of crude oil, of Brent oil. So this is the issues. We don't really escape it. What do you make, though, of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer in his address to the nation yesterday, trying to be more presidential, that actually he was one of his solutions to the issues, having offered no real credible, actual, tangible help to the vast majority of households in this country over their rising costs, over everything they're spending their money on, was that we should have a summit with our EU leaders and talk about closer ties economically and otherwise with our EU allies. As far as I'm concerned, any excuse by this arch Ramona, anti-democrat man who spent 3 years from 2016 trying to stop the Brexit vote, the biggest democratic vote for anything in our nation's history, to be enacted, basically any attempt to have an excuse to take us back into Europe by the back door. What do you make of that?
Absolutely. His answer to everything is to have a summit with his friends in Brussels, isn't it? Just he can't wait to be rubbing shoulders with those people again, get away from us oiks, and also get Britain away from America and back into the hands of Brussels and the European Union. He's wanted that for a long time. He'll use any excuse to break down Brexit. It's the 10th anniversary of Brexit in a couple of months. The largest
of the vote, yes.
Of the vote. Yeah, of the vote, of course. It took a while to go through.
Thanks to people like Keir Starmer.
Yeah, exactly right. And the largest democratic vote in the history of this country. I was a proud voter for it. And he hated it from the get-go and tried to overthrow it by making us have a second referendum. So he's always wanted to get back into the EU. But, the other thing is, isn't it funny how all these posh twits who spent the past 5 years campaigning, just stop oil, and now they can see what it means to just stop oil, because we've got this crisis. and it's going to cause us a lot of pain. But this is not down to Donald Trump, and this is not down to the Iran war. The reason Britain is so susceptible to global shocks like this is because of the suicidal policy of net zero, the fact we're not drilling for oil in the North Sea, we're not digging up any of our coal, we're not fracking, we're not becoming energy independent. So when Starmer and others imply that it's all down to Trump's war making, it's simply not true. It's down to their own stupid policies.
Absolutely. It is fascinating, actually, though, that apparently Rachel Reeves, we'll talk about this with my next guest, but Rachel Reeves is apparently now getting back to the idea of coming round to the idea we should perhaps be allowing new licences for drilling in the North Sea, perhaps realising that the economic woes that the country in are going to be blamed on her, whereas Ed Miliband, the Net Zero Secretary, is basically stopping doing anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope she wins. I hope she gets her way in this. I've never said that about Rachel before, so I'm quite surprised. But I think you're right when you said earlier on that the answer to the question is that Ed Miliband will get his way. And the reason I say that is because it's not just him, is it? It's the entire modern day left. It's the entire Labour establishment. They are all a bit net zero. They're all very wary of industry and modernity. They want to have a so-called clean country, even though that means we get our coal and oil from countries that often do things in a less clean way. The whole thing is psychotic. And it has, I think what the Iran war has proven is that as a consequence of government policy, Britain is in a very vulnerable position globally. And
Absolutely. Just interestingly, just going back to Iran, just to keep you up to breaking news, Nigel Farage has said in a press conference this morning that Donald Trump is not going to leave NATO, but also the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she has been addressing a virtual meeting in more than 40 countries aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz. She has condemned Iranian recklessness for hitting global economic security as she addressed that meeting. So again, you know, I would condemn British recklessness in hitting our national economic security, but there we are. Let's talk about security on our streets there as well. The London Mayor Sadiq Khan has declared that London is a safe place, despite 2 nights of chaos, violence and basically mob rule in Clapham in South London earlier this week. Police deployed en masse yesterday to make sure that mob violence brought to an end. A bunch of teenagers marauding through the Marks and Spencers, the Sainsbury's, blah, 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 apparently thinking it's all an absolute hoot. The police just basically saying, can you go now? Can you go now? Rather pathetically. I wonder if it had been perhaps a different demographic of people, like everyone has pointed out, Kemi Baden, not the Tory leader among them. Look, everyone can see the pictures, that it's young black youth. She says it's nothing to do with colour. This is, which I would agree with her, it's to do with, lack of discipline, lack of consequences and to people's actions. But it seems to me, and as one of our callers pointed out earlier, if that had been a marauding bunch of white kids, if that had been any other group, police would have come down rather more heavy-handed, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. And the left would have been more firm in their condemnation as well. Do you remember when young white girls and young white boys took part in those anti-migrant hotel protests? I mean, they were called fascist scum and the worst people on earth, even though they were very peaceful protests. So yeah, there's definitely a double standard. I agree with Kemi Baden. I don't think this is about race. I think this is about the fact that we don't have consequences for bad behavior and even for petty crime. When you see people leaping over the tube barriers, which I see every single day.
I challenge every time.
I challenge now as well because the authorities aren't doing it, or you see people playing their music out loud or shoplifting stuff. Or
I think you're getting middle-aged, Brendan. You're turning into me.
I'm becoming a real Karen. I try and shout at people as much as I possibly can, but because there does need to be consequences for bad behaviour and certainly for criminal behaviour. If these kids think they can get away with anything, that is our fault because we don't have the infrastructure of discipline that us guys remember when we were growing up. And
but they don't think that. They know that. They're not scared of their parents. I mean, again, I would love to look at every single of those kids and go to their families. I bet you anything there are very few dads involved in those families. I'm serious about this because they're not worried. Wait till your dad gets home is a serious threat. And I don't mean about someone, beating their kids. I mean just the presence of, I'm sorry, Men and women are different. That presence is very different in a home, and we know it. We know the impact on youngsters getting involved in crime and disorder, and drugs and alcohol and everything else if there isn't a dad in the home and that secure unit. But we also know they're not scared of their teachers. Teachers aren't allowed to basically sit down and shut up and listen to me. They're not allowed to do that. They're barely able to expel them at the moment. They're certainly not afraid of the police or any other authority. So they don't think that they can get away with stuff. They know they can.
Absolutely. And you're right. You know, the absence of father figures is a serious problem in some communities. We have to be open about this. Lord Sewell talks about this quite a lot, and Trevor Phillips has spoken about it as well, that in some communities, the absence of fathers is a problem. Because you're right, that threat that mothers would always make, wait till your father gets home, that had real clout. It had real meaning, because everyone needs a disciplinarian in their lives, especially young men, in fact. They need a father figure who tells them what's what and tells them to behave. But increasingly, kids don't have that in the home or in the school or in the world at large, because so few adults are willing to reprimand them and tell them off. This is the consequence of that kind of culture, I think.
Absolutely. We're scared to tell them off because God knows what they've got in their pocket. I mean, that's the real worry. Really interesting to talk to you. Always great to get your thoughts on everything. And I'm loving the fact you're as much of a Karen as me. That's Karen O'Neill, so Brendan O'Neill, joining us, chief political writer at Spiked Online. Philip Ingram, are you a bit of a Karen? But I read you. You're actually, I mean, you're trained to kill as a former senior intelligence military officer. When you tell someone to stop doing what you're doing on the street or on the public transport, do they actually listen to you?
Well, sometimes they do. But
do you have a gravitas that perhaps the rest of us don't have?
Only yesterday in the train, I had to tell someone off for playing their music out loud, and then the abuse that I got, saying it's a free country, mate, and all
I've always loved that.
And then when he got off the train, he came up to the window and spat at the window.
Oh, nice!
Which
so really classy.
That's
I always loved the reaction. Would you mind? I always say, would you mind if you're turning your music down? Like, why? Because I don't want to hear it. It's my music. Yes, no, I know. Yeah. That's my point. It's your music. I don't want to hear it. Yes. Have you not got headphones?
God help you invent headphones.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I'm genuine. You haven't got headphones, really? You know, it is extra. And what I find is that they look at you like, what? Yeah. No one has ever. No one has ever challenged or questioned them, ever. And that's
what's wrong with society.
The kids in that video, if you're listening, you must have seen, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that, what we've been playing. But the youngsters, and a lot of them, they are kids, you know, these aren't hardened criminals, but they're teenage kids. But they're the same teenage kids who wander along my local high street. I mean, basically, anyone who's got any sense of my local high street, and I live in a nice area in London, and you know, basically, once the kids get out of school, like, let's not be on the high street for that hour. You look at you, because they're just kind of marauding around the high street. There's fights outside the McDonald's. There's and
it's unpleasant.
2 14-year-olds are alleged to have knifed a 12-year-old at the local school. You know, that sort of thing. Didn't happen at my comp, and I just say didn't happen at your comp, but it happens routinely now, and it's just that feeling that they just look at you like, you know, what are you going to do? Call the police? You know, but they're not worried about going home. They're not worried about their dad. They're coming up. It's just, we have got a problem. And when the Sadiq Khan says, you know, that London is a safe city, look, a lot of stuff like the Elon Musks, you know, saying, oh, you know, London's over, Britain's over. I'm sorry, I walk through London all the time. You know, I've had my bag stolen. I reserve the right. I'm allowed to have my phone out in a public street. And not have it stolen. The solution is getting the thieves, not me having my phone away. I largely do feel safe, but I don't wander the streets at night on my own. I live in a nice area.
And in a fight, I'm with you on my side.
Totally. I fight dirty. But the reality is, you know, I don't think we're not in Mad Max territory, but it doesn't feel as safe. I certainly know of. You know, I remember there was spate of stabbings a few years ago, and there were at least 5 stabbings within walking distance of my home. And as I say, I live in a nice area.
Yeah. And so do I, and I feel uncomfortable walking around the streets, and I can look after myself.
You're in Birmingham, aren't you?
I feel uncomfortable on the train going between Birmingham and London at times when people get on.
I feel more uncomfortable on public transport because the bad behaviour is so bad, but also you're in a confined space.
Yeah.
You don't have the option, and people won't help. Yeah. And you cannot get into a any sort of conflict, I mean, verbal or otherwise, with young people because you simply don't know whether they've got a weapon and how far they will go. Because you want to shout abuse at me, I don't care. I get that on Twitter every day. But I could give as good as I get, but I'm not going to punch somebody. Yeah. I'm not going to stab someone or throw acid in their face. And I have no idea whether any youngster from sort of 12 or above will do that.
Yeah, and the trouble is you don't know whether anyone's going to, if someone tries to do that, going to come and try and help you, and what help they've got around as well. But society's broken from that perspective. We need to get some discipline back into it.
Looking at that footage of the youngsters marauding around the Mox and Sparks and the Sainsbury's and customers having to be locked in, I'm all in favour of the police literally going in and smashing kids to the ground, and if they get injured, they get injured. I really think they should be. I think we should be respectful of authority, but I think there should be. We've lost fear. It's not a police service. Yeah. It's a police force.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the only organisation, the only people allowed in this country by law. They have the state monopoly on violence, the legal use of violence, and if necessary, to stop someone marauding around a supermarket or stealing even a pint of milk. Yes, I think you should be allowed to smash them to the floor. I really think you should.
Their role is to protect the public and to protect property. And to do that, if that means that people who are threatening the public and threatening property are dealt with in a very robust manner, which is appropriate, then they should be dealt with that. Absolutely. But it shouldn't be you escalate up to the robust, you go straight in hard.
And as we were saying earlier, I doubt very, very much that if we had a different demographic doing that marauding, the police reaction would have been very different. I'm sorry, there's no pressure at all in my mind. 12:27 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts on everything we've been talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. I'll read some of your texts and tweets as well. This is Talk.
RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:30 is the time. Let's get straight to your messages coming in about Donald Trump and your calls about, well, Clapham and Donald Trump we'll get to. Donald Trump's threat to pull the US out of NATO. Alicia said, Trump has a point. No EU countries helped in Iran. Trump should know where he stands with his allies. Rob says, why should Trump protect Europe? He's for America, and rightly so. Good, says Lynn. All NATO wants is US money. They're useless on their own. These are all fair points. Barry says, Trump is looking for someone to blame for his own stupidity in getting into war with Iran. I don't think it was stupid. I think his language and his rhetoric stupid, but in terms of the war, I think it's sensible. Wish they'd planned for the Strait of Hormuz to be closed there. David says European countries can't rely on the US anymore, especially after he disrespected our troops in Afghanistan. Yeah, that was outrageous. NATO needs to detach from the US. Ben says, NATO is the US, guys, sorry. Ben says, I'll help them pack. We can welcome them back when they get a sensible, respectable, trustworthy president back in charge. Ignore him, says Darren. His views change every 90 seconds. Whole variety of views there. Let's go to Graham, who's in Yorkshire. Graham, what do you make of it?
Well, good afternoon, Julia. A great show. Some wonderful guests as well. I could talk for an hour about all these things on Trump and so on, but your colleagues asked me to restrict it to a comment I made to him about Starmer.
Right.
And not knowing where he's coming from when he says that following, we've had the base in Cyprus that's been bombed. We've had British citizens who were killed in the October the 7th.
Yeah.
All these sort of problems with the attacks that have been going on, that we know have been going on at the behest of the IRGC in throughout the UK, but fortunately MI5 has stopped them. And they still, yesterday we had the bombing of the depot, British oil company depot across in the Middle East, and still Starmer says we're not involved.
Yes, we're not involved. Yeah.
Where on earth does he get this from? If one of these cruise missiles, whichever missiles they actually hit London,
we'd be involved.
Say, well, we should improve our air defences. We're not going to retaliate, but we'll improve our air defences. We've been involved in this from day one.
Yeah, but also we didn't allow the US to use the Diego Garcia base, which they had a right. What the hell are we doing sharing a base with them and not letting them use it? But then we had, we weren't involved. Great. Well, that didn't stop us base in Cyprus from getting bombed, did it? So by definition, we're involved.
It never will. It never will. And Iran have always lumped their three main enemies have been Israel, the US, and the UK. Yeah. They've always done that. Friday prayers or whatever it is have always included insults to us.
Death to Britain, death to the little Satan. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And for him to have denied their access, it wasn't going to make any difference to whether Trump decided to go and.
But it's posturing. Places. It's posturing to a domestic audience ahead of local elections, isn't it?
Exactly. And with all the left-wingers, they always think that what will happen, they'll pander to to the Muslims, and in the end they'll be able to control them. They never will. They never have.
No, exactly. Very interesting. And again, it's to the left wing as well, who was fully signed up to this stuff. Graham, really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Stuart, who is in Staffordshire. Stuart, you want to talk about these sort of marauding teens in Clapham. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I think it's terrible. They're all using the Snapchat.
Oh, Stuart, I'm so sorry. And your phone line's a bit funny. Can you, I don't know, take a step to the right or something? You seems to work.
No, I'm still here.
No? Oh, no. Can you just try and move around a little bit, or take it off speakerphone or whatever it is? Might be the issue.
I've got it glued to my ear. Hang on.
Oh, that's a bit better. Stay there. Don't move. What do you want to say?
I'm a child in the corner now. I'm in a corner.
There you are.
But no, as far as the Clapham kids riot, it's just madness. They're using Snapchat. They're telling each other, oh, where we're going to meet, where we're going to do this. And it's not just in Clapham, it's up and down the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in a small town, and they're not black kids, they're not Asian kids, they're white kids.
Yep.
Walking around, wearing hoodies, wearing masks, intimidating old people, walking past shops, banging on windows, picking on Chinese takeaways.
Yep.
And
nothing happens.
Yeah, police. We've got 2 officers to cover the whole of Staffordshire Moorlands.
Yeah, they're not going to be taking action. But it's intimidating. It's scary for people. People don't feel safe.
No, they don't. And then they end up taking law into their own hands, and end up getting arrested because, as I said, you've got these people out there saying, which went on years ago, you can't chastise your own children.
Yeah.
You can't tell them off. You've got to reason with them. How can you reason with a child that doesn't know about reasoning?
I've never had any problem telling my kid off, or indeed anyone else's children off. I have to say, it doesn't bother me at all. I'm always fascinated, and people go, you're criticising my parenting, criticising my child. No, I'm criticising you as a parent. If I have to tell your kid off in a public place, I'm sorry, I am that much of a Karen. I'm fully in favour. I think we need to get back to a state of play where everyone, with that awful phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, but everybody going, oi, stop it. And some very big, strong, burly men, you know, your Philip Ingrams in the studio backing us up. That's what we need.
Yeah, I like Philip Ingram. I like watching his podcast and everything.
Yeah, okay, you. Oh, he's got a big grin on his face now. Stuart, thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate that. Oh, yeah. You're getting some love today, Philip.
I am, and we've got a lovely audience that are out there that are listening to us.
Don't go crawling to them.
But Mark, one
Tree them mean, keep them keen.
Mark on Twitter pointed out a very valid point. If you look at what the Japanese youth did after their game against England, the football match, they went and cleared up all the stands and picked up all the litter and put all the popcorn and they did that. That's a disciplined society. Yeah. Whereas what did the England youth do? They left everything everywhere for someone else to clear up.
Yeah.
That's a society that works against a broken society.
I'm of the view that litter is the first sign. It's the first thing. I'm someone, I will pick up other people's litter, because that broken windows theory is absolutely, sorry, if someone else has left some. It really is. People, you know, you start me on the bins and all that, but genuinely, people just not caring about their local high street, not caring about their streets. That is where it all starts. And people just not bothering, not caring. Well, you know what? I'll tell you where you're going to be in 10 years' time, and you ain't going to like it. 12:37 is the time. Just to let you know, we are giving you the chance to win a life-changing £20,000. Completely tax-free here on Talk. That is £20,000 straight into your bank account. You can spend it, save it, splash it. It's entirely up to you. That's a lot of Easter eggs, £20,000. Here's how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 9th of April 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Good luck with that. Let's take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about, is the Labour government going to change its mind on net zero? Apparently, the Chancellor has when it comes to drilling for new licences for drilling in the North Sea. Is there likely to be a win on that? Well, fingers crossed. We'll talk about that with Andy Mayer from the Institute of Economic Affairs up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:40 is the time. Let's talk about, well, whether or not there's some hope, possible scintilla of hope. There might be some sense in the government after the revelation that apparently behind the scenes, Rachel Reeves, the hopeless Chancellor, may well be backing new licences for drilling in the North Sea. But that's opened up a rift with Ed Miliband, the Energy and Net Zero Secretary, who's wholly against it. Well, let's talk about this with Andy Mayer. He's energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs, a free market think tank. Good afternoon to you, Andy.
Good afternoon, Julia.
How hopeful are we about this? Because, I mean, if this were the case, if we get 2 new energy drilling sites in the North Sea, that would be a great thing, wouldn't it, to actually get us back to some semblance of a start back to energy security?
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like it could be good news, and I see a couple of other Labour MPs have also started tweeting as though the decision has already been taken. So possibly what Keir Starmer said recently, that this is Ed Miliband's decision, is either means he's forced Ed to change his mind, or he's actually going to remember that he's Prime Minister.
Yes.
That Ed works for him.
That was a bizarre PMQs, wasn't it? 3 questions and 3 answers to Kemi Badenoch, where he insisted, look, you know, it's very clear under the law that it's the Energy Secretary who makes a decision about these 2 these oil and gas drilling sites and these licences, as if he's not the person who appoints the Energy Secretary.
Yeah, he's not Ed Miliband's lawyer, and if he were, he would be advising him that he has a hopeless case. Yeah. Everybody is coming out against Ed Miliband's position, which, to be clear, is purely ideological. He wants to stop these new fields or delay them indefinitely because he fundamentally believes that the United Kingdom should be off, as he puts it, the fossil fuels roller coaster. But you know what? To run a roller coaster, you actually need to have secure, firm energy.
You make a fair point. Can you explain, for the hard of understanding at the back, I mean Ed Miliband, were he or any of his advisors who were tuning in, just, you know, make it something that a 6-year-old can understand, because let's face it, any 6-year-old who had the basics of our energy supply explained to them would know that we needed to have more, you know, basically more secure supplies of fossil fuels, oil, gas and fracking gas from the North Sea and everywhere else, rather than being at the whims of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz for our energy prices. When Ed Miliband says if we were more reliant on renewables, we wouldn't have this problem, we wouldn't see these price hikes, and we'd have lower energy prices and more energy security. Can you explain in words of one syllable why that's a barefaced lie?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Father Ted problem. I mean, our oil reserves may be really small, but the Gulf of Hormuz is really far away. And what's going on in his mind is the idea that because the oil could be sold somewhere else from the North Sea, that it can't affect price in the UK. And he has a point, but it's not a very good one, because as everybody else has pointed out, the purpose of drilling is to provide that security of supply closer to home, where it will cost a little bit less. It will mean that our emissions are lower because we're not dragging it all the way across an ocean. Yeah. And it does enable us to find out actually if there's more stuff there, because you never really know what the reserves are until you start drilling. And the Norwegians have proven that there are more things under that sea than we thought.
Exactly. With the old
5-10 years
technology,
ago.
we've got a lot more ability to get that oil out and the gas out. And again, when the price goes up, it makes it more worthwhile. We've got a load of companies. Apparently, there's nothing there. And yet there are loads of multi-billion-pound multinational companies who apparently think it's worth their while, which is strange because they're motivated by profit. But also, crucially, our exchequer will be getting the taxes on that extraction of oil and gas in the North Sea, as opposed to what we do now, which is pay it to the companies who are then paying it to the Norwegian government and their sovereign wealth fund, rather than to us. So clearly we would benefit financially, the government, in terms of the extra taxes they could rake in, which they could probably, mad idea, I know they wouldn't do it, then take off us.
Yeah, so one of the points the leader of the opposition has made is that she might use the additional revenue from the North Sea to reduce energy bills. Now, it's not necessarily the best use of it, but if the government is thinking about intervening in that way because of high prices, then clearly you could make that link.
But they could actually do it. And we were promised £300 cheaper energy bills by the end of this Parliament. No one's thinking that's going to happen. We've had about, under the latest off-gem 3-month guarantee for our energy bills. Average household bill, we're going to take about £117 off, I think it is, for the next 3 months. But prediction was, until yesterday, about a £300 extra hit on our bills after that in July. But now we're talking about predictions of a £440 hike in a joint gas and and electricity energy bill for most households. That's a huge sum of money for many households who are already struggling, and with higher prices and everything else, including fuel to put in their car, a lot of people are going to basically be pushed into debt.
Yeah, and this is just the first wave effect. So after that bill increases hit, then the bill increases across absolutely everything are going to start feeding through for the rest of the year. So if you're not saving now for a rainy day, you really need to do so, because it's going to get very expensive.
As should the government have done. What do you make of Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader's her pledge to ditch carbon levies? She says are killing British industry, the carbon tax regime. Basically, it's about reducing industrial emissions. It brings in about $4 billion a year to the exchequer, but the idea is it's supposed to, well, basically encourage businesses to reduce emissions. But of course, it also basically forces industrial production that has high carbon emissions out of the country, does it not? The criticism from the Labour Party and from the usual brigade has been, from the left, well, you know, you'd have to replace that $4 billion from elsewhere. But is it likely that enough industry would come back to this country without those carbon taxes that you could actually, you know, boost our economy enough to cover that extra loss?
Yeah, well, so some of these proposals are straightforwardly sensible, because the original purpose of the carbon taxes they're talking about is past. When one of them was brought in, for example, it was to get coal off the grid. Well, coal is now off the grid, so why are we still paying the taxes? Other parts of them relate more to the government's negotiating strategy with the EU, so they've linked us up more closely with the EU emissions trading scheme, for example, which the Tories would withdraw us from. And that's not really about bills at that point. That's really about some kind of virtue signalling over a trade deal, potentially.
Yeah. Okay.
And on that basis, probably it would be a good thing to get rid of it. I mean, there is an economic argument for having some kind of carbon tax that reflects the social environmental costs of dealing with greenhouse gas emissions. But the range of taxes we've got on bills in the UK is absolutely mad. It's far too complicated for any one person to understand, let alone most businesses. And what that creates is uncertainty, and what that reduces is investment. So yeah, if you simplify the tax system and reduce the unnecessary taxes, in theory, you would get growth in some areas, and that additional growth would then cover the gap created by cutting the taxes. But it is a difficult decision. Okay,
really good to talk to you. Great to get your expertise. Energy analyst Andy Mayer from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Philip Ingram, listening to all of that, are you hopeful there might be some sense on this? Because I figure we're going to have blackouts on a cold December evening before the government is basically forced by public opinion to drop this madness.
Well, I'm hoping Rachel Reeves has taken a common sense pill, but it makes no sense that we don't follow Norway's lead. Where they've managed to get a sovereign wealth fund from the taxes that they got from North Sea oil. Why? And it's not just this government who are making it worse by pushing us further down this green agenda, but the last government did the same, and they should have been investing more in drilling in North Sea. We've got
and
access
nuclear
to
power, by the way, which is the cleanest and most reliable power.
Exactly. And then turning the tax revenues that we get from it into a sovereign wealth fund so that we can absorb the shocks.
It was frittered away, that money, on basically on tax cuts and basically it should have been at least spent on investment projects. It should that sovereign wealth fund worth 4% of the world's economy, effectively. That's from Norway, that tiny little country. That's what they managed to do with their wealth. Higher standard of living than us as well. Just saying. Anyway, 12:49 is the time. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking to policing commentator Danny Shaw about, I'd love to hear his thoughts on the policing of what's been going on in Clapham, but also the non-crime hate incidents that have been scrapped, we're told, but haven't really, and why the Met Chief says it's going to free up the police to start tackling real crime. But they were always able to do that, weren't they? That's up next. This is Talk.
10, 9, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
Houston now controlling the flight of integrity on the Artemis 2 mission around the moon.
The integrity, AMT high.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up to 12:53 in Collins in just a few moments. Tells us what's happening on his show. First up, let's welcome Danny Shaw to the show. He's a policing, crime and justice commentator we know well. Welcome back to the show, Danny.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I hadn't asked you about this in advance, but I would like to do it, and I'm sure you're abreast of it, as you are always on these big news stories. What do you make of what's been happening in Clapham with the mayhem on the high street there, marauding teenagers, obviously all thinking it's a huge laugh to be running in and out of these stores, and the police not really looking like they're coming down hard on these kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think the police are sort of taken by surprise. Not quite sure why. Well, they ought to be monitoring social media. I mean, this is part of sort of core policing operations, is to monitor potential link-ups, as they're called, these sort of mass meetings where teenagers gather, and they should be doing that. And trying to put some prevention in place, or trying to certainly sort of
these aren't arch organised criminals. There's a bunch of kids on TikTok or Snapchat or wherever the hell they're on this week. They've probably got some new social media I haven't heard of. They're not on Facebook, I know that, but then neither am I. But they should be looking for keywords and patterns of messaging, surely.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing is, OK, there's a bunch of teenagers who are just wanting to sort of have a mass meet or a mass brawl or whatever it is. But the concern is that this will spread, and that then you will get more violent elements and criminal elements joining in, and there could be mass shop theft, mass violence and so on, and that's the real worry. I mean, the Metropolitan Police has now put some sort of messages out there saying, don't think you're going to get away with this. Everything's captured on CCTV.
They say that.
Yeah, but they do have a record, Julia, of doing that. It doesn't get so much publicity because it happens after the event, but they will have a team, I'm sure, scrutinising the CCTV footage, trying to recognise suspects using facial recognition retrospectively to identify people. They will, I'm sure, make more arrests.
There will be plenty. We've had about 5 arrests, haven't we, as teenage girls? And I've certainly noticed, like Oxford Street in central London, sometimes there you see loads and loads of security staff outside wearing their yellow, high-vis vests. It's like, ask them what's going on. Oh, word is that there's going to be a load of organised crimes doing raids on the big stores. So, you've got a watch shop or a trainer shop, you want to be having your security. But it's just extraordinary. And you see, vans full of police, but you think, the fact that, at least they're getting the forewarning, but the fact that we even have to think about this stuff is extraordinary. Let's talk about, that's proper policing, isn't it? That's actually stopping, stealing, unrest on our streets, customers, staff intimidated, proper actual crimes, may not be the most serious, but actual crimes. Now, the Metropolitan Police Chief, the most senior copper in the land, Sir Mark Rowley, he has said that actually scrapping non-crime hate incidents has enabled officers to solve more real crimes rather than dealing with what is going on, these incidents often online. But that's a load of abject nonsense, isn't it? Because there was nothing ever stopping police from focusing on real crimes, burglary and the like, and assaults, and not focusing on someone complaining about someone misgendering trans people, in their view, on social media. So it's an absolute load of nonsense for him to claim this.
Well, I think what happened was that the Metropolitan Police was sort of bound by the guidance that had been issued over the last few years from the College of Policing in particular, and also the National Police Chiefs Council and the Home Office. The previous government, Chris Philp, who's now the Shadow Home Secretary, when he was Policing Minister, he was responsible for issuing new guidance on non-crime hate incidents 3 years ago. And I think what happened is that police forces felt they had to follow that. Now, of course, Sir Mark Rowley several months ago decided to sort of scrap that policy, not investigate non-crime hate incidents after the Graham Linehan affair, the comedian who was detained with armed officers at Heathrow Airport for a couple of offensive tweets, may have caused offence, may have been upsetting, not a very good stab at dark humour perhaps, but certainly not a crime and not something he should have been investigated and held in custody for. So Mark Rowley, decided to sort of proactively abandon that policy and step out, and he says, well, it's now save police time, and now some new guidance is being sort of distributed to all police forces. We won't have the recording of non-crime hate incidents. There'll be more of a sort of triage approach.
Well, we're told this, aren't we? We spoke to Harry Miller of Fair Cop earlier in the week, and he's pointing out, this is just a rebranding, and there's an awful lot of discretion, not just for chief constables, but also for individual officers, for them to decide whether they think this could lead to a serious crime incident, a serious crime. I'm not going to celebrate this. We had two former Tory Home Secretaries saying they were gone. They didn't get rid of them. We know that the top of the chief force, police chiefs and indeed the College of Policing completely and utterly captured and woke. I don't believe for a moment we've got rid of these things. They're just going to call them something else. No,
I think the guidance, Julia, will make a difference. I really do, because I think the message has gone out loud and clear that things have gone too far. Look, you're going to have to leave it to police officers' discretion. You can't have it both ways. You can't say we have to have complete guidance in place and every single officer has to act like a robot, and at the same time say, well, we want the police officer on the street or the person in the control room to be able to make some decisions using their common sense. That's what I want them to use.
But they've been using their common sense, using their discretion for the last few years, and people are being arrested for using the correct grammatical and biological pronouns for people, and they haven't gone, sorry, I'm not investigating this. I mean, that's my wariness. I'm so sorry to not give you a right reply to that, and we'll